There will now be an opportunity for silent prayer or meditation. Please be seated. Order, honorable members. Order. In the interest of safety, order, honorable members. In the interest of safety, honorable members, the House has started its proceedings. It's now time to end your bilateral discussions and take up your seats. Please keep on your masks and restrict your movement as far as possible and stay in your designated area. And you are requested to sign the attendance slips that has been provided on the desks in front of you. The only item on today's order paper is questions addressed to the ministers in Cluster 5, Economics. There are 4 supplementary questions on each question, and parties have already given an indication of which questions their members wish to pose a supplementary question. Adequate notice was given to parties for this purpose. This was done to facilitate participation of members who are connecting to the sitting through the virtual platform. The members who will pose supplementary questions will be recognized by the presiding officer. In allocating opportunities for supplementary questions, the principle of fairness, amongst others, have been applied. If a member who is supposed to ask a supplementary question through the virtual platform is unable to do so due to technical difficulties, the party whip on duty will be allowed to ask the question on behalf of their member. When all supplementary questions have been answered by the executive, we will proceed to the next question on the question paper. The first question has been asked by the Honorable Manku to the Minister of Transport. I've been informed that the Minister will be answering questions here from the chamber. The Honorable Minister. The Honorable Minister of Transport. May I request the Chief Whip of the Majority Party to ascertain the movements of the Minister, because this session was set down specifically for questions to ministers, and we expect ministers to be present when they indicate that they will be in the chamber. We cannot delay the business of the House due to the unavailability of a minister who's supposed to be here. I don't think the shadow minister is prepared to answer the question.
Well prepared.
Honorable members, I suggest we proceed to the next question. We proceed to the next question, and that is the question that has been asked by the Honorable Kachalia to the Minister of Public Enterprises. Is the Minister of Public Enterprises on the platform?
Yes, I am, Chairperson.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. Honorable Minister, you may proceed.
Good afternoon, Chair. Good afternoon to honorable members. The government has not considered declaring a state of disaster to respond to the energy challenges that we are facing in the Republic of South Africa. In terms of the Disaster Management Act, for the information of Honorable Kachalia, a disaster means a progressive or sudden, widespread or localized natural or human-caused occurrence which causes or threatens to cause death, injury, or disease. Secondly, damage to property or the environment and infrastructure. Thirdly, disruption of the life of the community. And the magnitude of that exceeds the ability of those affected by the disaster to cope with its effects using only their resources. The facts, Chairperson, that have emerged in the most recent report from the Commission chaired by the Chief Justice, Honorable Zondo, released on Friday, 29 April 2022, states that, and I quote, the evidence proves the scheme by the Guptas to capture Eskom, install the Guptas, selected officials in strategic positions, within Eskom as members of the board and committees of the board and the executives, and then divert Eskom's assets to the Gupta's financial advantage, close quotation. Clearly, the evidence before the commission further, and I quote, revealed quite clearly that part of the reason why some of the state-owned companies have performed as badly as they have, or why some rely on government bailouts year in and year out, is the caliber of some of the people who are appointed as members of the boards of these companies and who are their chief executive officers or CFOs. State capture chairperson contributed to the energy crisis as the commission evidence revealed. For example, it says Eskom concluded a coal supply agreement with Tegeta for the supply of a total quantity of almost 14 million tons, and the agreed contract price was 3.7 billion rands, commencing 1st April 2015 to the 30th of September 2025. Executives and the boards of Eskom at that time were tirelessly working to benefit the Guptas by providing long-term contracts, increasing the scope and budget while completely flouting public procurement prescripts. And there was evidence before the commission as to how this was done by various officials and where no due diligence was actually undertaken. Notwithstanding this, these are the various initiatives that government has been taking for the last few years in order to restore energy security in South Africa. Since March 2018, government and the Eskom board and management has been working diligently to restore good governance, operational stability, and financial sustainability in Eskom. Secondly, this is in addition to the restructuring of Eskom to meet the requirements of the new trends in the energy market. Thirdly, the IRP 2019 was developed by government to provide a medium-term perspective on the energy transition that South Africa will have to undergo. Fourth, Eskom has made various attempts to overcome the lack of maintenance in the past with various philosophies and approaches in respect of maintenance, some of which is working and admittedly some of which is not. Fifth, restoring engineering and operational discipline, which disappeared during the state capture period. Acting against corruption, for example, against ABB and retrieving 1.5 billion rands, McKinsey, a billion rands, trillion, and a 3 billion rand claim against former board and management of Eskom as well. 7, changing procurement practices, which is still work in progress. 8, completing the Medupi and Kusile build projects, notwithstanding the various difficulties that are confronted by Eskom. Preparing for the new renewables and the just energy transition are among some of the things that Eskom is undertaking, Chairperson. There should therefore be a distinction made between a state of disaster just for dramatic effect as compared to a power system emergency, which falls within the purview of the systems operator and based on criteria determined by this operator. At all times, the main imperative is to avoid the total collapse of the grid, as has occurred in California and more recently in Texas of the United States. There are therefore internal plans to manage the power system that would allow the systems operator to implement up to stage 8 load shedding in order to protect the grid from total collapse. Eskom manages the stability of the grid with load shedding as a key mechanism to mitigate against the grid collapse. At this stage, there is absolutely no requirement for Eskom or government to declare such an emergency. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. I will now recognize the Honorable Kachalia.
While President Ramaphosa vows to do everything to make load shedding a thing of the past, and indeed once announced that load shedding had ended, we are currently being hit as I speak with stage 2 load shedding, an unacceptable reality of some 15 years duration under the ANC, highlighting this government's chronic inability to keep the lights on. Experts the world over agree that the staff complement at Eskom is hugely bloated, and that tens of billions of rands in savings from the retrenchment of dead wood cadres are patently needed for the much needed maintenance and reinvestment. Moreover, the CEO has recently identified incompetent plant operators as a major factor contributing to the current mess. In view of this, will the Minister prioritize the future of our electricity security as his job demands before securing the votes and the placation of unions who in any case cause the President to unceremoniously flee their ire in a police nyala? And will he take the necessary steps to free the much needed financial resources by not blocking these retrenchments, as well as allowing fit for purpose employees to fill the much needed gaps?
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Chairperson, and thank you to Honourable Kachalia. Clearly, it is our priority as government, and certainly within my portfolio, but more importantly of the board and of the management, to ensure that we prioritize stability within the energy system. But the reality, Chairperson, as has been repeated on many occasions, is that Eskom requires a space of about 4,000 to 6,000 megawatts of additional energy so that the necessary maintenance can be undertaken. It's also a well-established fact, Chairperson, and this is also in the report of the Zondo Commission, that there has been neglect on the maintenance side for many years, particularly during the state capture period, in order to ensure that, inverted commas, the lights stay on. That is the legacy that we have to now overcome. As far as the staff is concerned, there's no doubt that there is a possibility for trimming the staff numbers, but unlike Mr. Kachalia, we have a social responsibility as government, not just to placate unions, but to look after workers and look after their families and look after the well-being of communities as well. And far more important than putting them out on the streets when we have the high level of unemployment that we do, is to attempt to retrain them, to reorientate them towards the new developments as far as renewable energy investments that will be taking place all over the country, but particularly in the near future on Eskom land as well. So there will be some stability in the next year or more, but what we require is this 4,000 to 6,000 megawatts of energy, which needs to be brought online. And that is certainly our priority. Thank you.
The next follow-up question will be asked by the Honourable Swart.
Thank you, House Chair. Arising from your response, Honourable Minister, and in addition to your references to the Zondo Commission, the ACDP welcomes your comments of the weekend that all sections of society should understand the negative and devastating impact that corruption and state capture has had in institutions, and that the real corruptors must be held to account. More importantly, Honourable Minister, you said those who have benefited in one way or another must stop being treated as little heroes because they are not. When the ACDP served with you, Honourable Minister, and other MPs on the Eskom parliamentary inquiry, we had no idea of the exact extent of the looting and corruption, which the Zondo Commission has now quantified at a staggering 14.7 billion. Would you agree, Honourable Minister, that had this 14.7 billion not been stolen, it would have gone a long way to fund much needed maintenance and stabilize the power supply at Eskom? And if so, that further and more urgent steps should be taken by law enforcement agencies to recover these funds, wherever they may be, and ensure that those implicated are put behind bars. I thank you.
The Honourable Minister.
Chairperson, I would certainly agree with Honourable Swart that had that, and I'm sure the amount of money, if we do a little bit more homework, might even be more than that, Honourable Swart, who played a very important role, Chairperson, together with a number of members of the opposition and the ANC during the parliamentary inquiry into Eskom in 2017. But he's absolutely right, Honourable Swart, that money could be used to do more maintenance, to stabilize the energy situation in South Africa. And one can't but absolutely agree with him that the time has now come for the law enforcement agencies to not only just show their teeth, but use their teeth and ensure that that which the public of South Africa wants, which is these affected and listed people in these reports, to now account for the manner in which they've done a disservice to this country and find themselves where appropriate in orange overalls as well. On the question of funds being retrieved, that's also an absolute priority as well. And ESCOM, through its board, has taken an important initiative, as I said earlier on, in lodging a claim of over 3 billion rands against former directors on the ESCOM board during the state capture period and the management of that time as well. So there's absolutely no doubt that the state capture activities had a massive and negative effect on ESCOM itself and therefore on our country and its economy. But the key now, as we work together during the 2017 period, is for us to put our collective efforts together and make sure that a vital institution like ESCOM is put on its feet again, whilst at the same time inviting private sector investment into the renewable industry. Thank you.
The next follow-up question is to be asked by the Honorable Vessels.
Thank you, Honourable Chairperson. Chair, would the Minister agree that the crisis facing ESCOM is not limited to inefficient generation of electricity, but also goes to the incapacity of the electricity network, and that a lot of energy is lost, electricity that is produced are lost because of incapacity of the grid of the network? And will the Minister then make an effort to recruit people that were in service of ESCOM that do have the expertise to assist at this stage, that were retrenched because of various reasons? Will he make an effort to recruit those people with the necessary skills to assist us in this crisis? I thank you.
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Chairperson. Honourable Vessels, I agree that the generation side of the ESCOM business has a huge challenge, but where I beg to disagree with you is that we have an incapacity in the transmission grid. The transmission grid in South Africa, which is now under the control of a separate entity, Transmission Company South Africa, as part of the restructuring of ESCOM, is one of the best run grids in the world and operates on world-class standards. The loss of electricity that you speak of is the normal loss that one would see, and I'm no electrical engineer, but this is what I've learned, as electricity is generated at a particular wattage and it then gets reduced over long kilometers of these lines to the appropriate voltage that is utilized in one's home or in a particular business. So the grid itself and the systems operator that I referred to in my earlier response are operating on world-class standards, and we have no fear. Where we do need to give further attention is the extension of that grid. And you've heard in the public domain that the CEO of ESCOM speaks of about 100 to 150 billion rand investment that needs to take place in extending the grid, particularly in parts of the Eastern Cape, Northern Cape, and some other parts of the country where renewable energy plants are being installed and invested in. And that is work in progress in terms of planning in that particular area. As far as recruitment of previous employees who have the necessary experience, some of that is happening already. And the ESCOM management and board is not shy in that particular regard. Thank you.
The last supplementary question will be asked by the Honourable Heron.
Thank you, House Chair, and thank you, Minister. Minister, I think we can agree that we all understand what brought us to the position that we're in with regards to the ESCOM crisis, so we can leave the blame game behind us and let the law enforcement authorities deal with it. But I think, Minister, what South Africans need right now is a stable electricity supply. And the question really is, how do we get that immediately or as soon as possible? Do we have the expertise in South Africa and in ESCOM in order to stabilize the electricity supply and to give South Africans what they need now and let the law enforcement authorities deal with what hollowed out ESCOM in the past? Thank you.
The Honourable Minister.
Chairperson, I think Honourable Heron must distinguish with great respect between what he calls blame game and understanding the true root causes of some of the challenges and problems that we face today. I think dismissing it as blame game doesn't actually help. It's like going to a doctor and the doctor tells you that the cause of your symptoms is X, and you say, don't worry about the causes, just treat my symptoms. And that's a sure way of ending up on the wrong side of life. As far as skills in ESCOM is concerned, ESCOM has the basic skills in generation, distribution, and transmission, but it can certainly do with a lot more skills in relation to generation expertise and experience as well, to train the younger generation of engineers and operators that are within the plant at this point in time. And that is a matter that the CEO is giving attention to at the moment. And there's no easy and quick fix in terms of getting a stable electricity supply, but there is a lot of initiatives that the Minerals and Energy Department, with Mr. Montash, is taking in order to ensure that grid windows 5 and 6 are beginning to become operational, and attention is being given to other parts of the IRP-19 with a view to quicker implementation in that regard as well. Attention is similarly being given to the utilization of gas as a step-down possibility, as we keep in line with the commitments that we've made at the various COP conferences that have been taking place around the world. So yes, there's a sufficient foundation to build on, but at the same time, there are new things and additional things that need to be done. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. Honourable members, may I just request those members who are on the virtual platform to keep their mics muted. It causes a disturbance to the Honourable Minister that's responding, and also to the members who are in the House. I will now return to the first question on the question paper, question number 246, that has been asked by the Honourable Manku to the Honourable Minister of Transport. Welcome, Honourable Minister.
Thank you very much, honorable members. As a policy department, the Department of Transport is working with all key stakeholders with an interest in the development of an efficient and competitive rail system in the country to bring about a rail renaissance. This will position rail as a backbone of our transport system, both for passenger and freight. Historically, there has been significant underinvestment in rail infrastructure, negatively affecting the competitiveness of rail. The White Paper on National Rail Policy, recently approved by Cabinet, acknowledges the need for investment in rail infrastructure, building on existing programs in respect of both freight and passenger rail. The large-scale vandalism and theft of rail infrastructure has undermined efforts to develop rail infrastructure, but efforts are underway to replace and rehabilitate the damaged infrastructure, while pursuing measures in place to secure the new investment. The work to develop rail infrastructure is ongoing and will be given impetus by the implementation of the new policy trajectory articulated in the White Paper on National Rail Policy. Central to this is the establishment of a central rail planning unit within the Department of Transport to work on medium-term and long-term planning for the implementation of a number of rail intervention strategies going forward. This will be a specialized unit with expertise to conduct research and inform rail infrastructure development choices, among others, both for passenger and freight. The policy requires the finalization and the publication of the National Rail Master Plan to guide the country in terms of rail development priorities, identifying strategic corridors required for investments and types of rail infrastructure development, timelines and costs. Rail infrastructure development will be coordinated from the center and implemented simultaneously across the country in strategic corridors as identified in the National Rail Master Plan. However, the current efforts will continue and will be integrated into the master plan. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. The first supplementary question goes to the Honourable Manku.
Thank you very much, Honourable Chair. Minister, key to the policy you've just alluded to of moving freight from road to rail are two entities, PRASA and Transnet. How do you plan to cooperate or make cooperation between PRASA and Transnet to make sure that the dwindling numbers of freight being moved by rail now are increased? And secondly, what is your plan to remove all those bottlenecks that are causing this decline of freight movement on trains? Thank you, Honourable Chair.
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you very much, Honourable Member. The long distance freight and passenger transport is primarily on the Transnet freight rail network. PRASA is in discussion with Transnet on catering for passengers. In their current access approach to market to invite third-party operators. Where access is required to freight to go through PRASA network, the agreement between the two entities will be based on giving a priority to passenger traffic. Currently, PRASA and Transnet collaborate between our train operations units.
The next supplementary question is to be asked by the Honourable Noluchungu. Are you taking the follow-up question on behalf of the member?
I am. Just give me 1 second, Chair. Please, I'm busy talking. I know what I'm going to say. Minister Jola, in 2006, the Railway Safety Regulator released a report that painted a concerning picture about the safety of our railway infrastructure. Again, in its 2017-18 report, the regulator reported a 21% increase in theft of assets and malicious damage to property. Railway transport doesn't work to its capacity because of theft of railway infrastructure, amongst other things. Has the government considered reintroducing railway police to safeguard railway infrastructure and ensure that this form of transport is utilized optimally to ease the pressure from the roads? Thank you.
Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The issue of railway police within the rail passenger network is not a decision that we are not considering. The main question is the question of resources. And I'm going to be honest with you because I don't want to say something here and then tomorrow when you go for your oversight, you don't see railway police. You say, I came to Parliament, I promised you something that we can't implement. We do have 2,000 plus railway police deployed in the network from SAPS. And we have inherited that from the past. And from the South African Police Service, we do have that. It is complemented by security companies, which have been deployed as we recover different corridors in the country. So to answer your question, if you go now, for instance, in Mabopane and other corridors that we are reviving, you're asking where? I am telling you one answer is Mabopane. You go to Mabopane, no, everywhere else where we are reviving the rail network, passenger rail network, the strategy is we deploy security. So that is happening everywhere in the country. So that is what I wish to answer to you, but you will see railway police, which is 2,000 plus, not deployed within the railway network in terms of passengers and all of that, which is quite inadequate and not enough. South Africa still needs boots on the ground in terms of the police and so on, and it will not be in a position today to deploy extra police within the rail network. So we're complementing that with security companies, and we're doing very well at the present moment with regard to that.
The next follow-up question is to be asked by the Honorable Meshu.
Thank you, Chairperson. Government has for years allowed people to invade land and build shacks whenever they wanted. They did not make state land available to needy people who needed a place they would call home. It was therefore not surprising when some invaders started building along railway lines, as has happened in Siyatlala informal settlement in Langa. By so doing, these families have prevented Metro Rail from reopening the central line beyond Langa. My question to the Honorable Minister is, why is government not complying with the Western Cape High Court order that ruled that families in the Siyatlala informal settlement should be moved and housed on land that has basic services, as that will enable the free movement of goods and people on the rail, particularly workers who need safer and cheaper mode of transport, and we all know that trains are always cheaper. So why is the court order not implemented so that that route can be open for passengers? Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Honorable Minister.
Thank you, Honorable Mishwe. As we are speaking now, we are working with the government of the Western Cape. We are working with the Cape Town Municipality, Human Settlement, under Human Settlement HDA. We are also working with the Department of Public Works. The Department of Human Settlement have secured a piece of land where we'll be moving the people to comply with the court order. What we're doing as the passenger rail, particularly PRASA, is to continue with our work. If you go to Langa now, you will see the work that we're doing to secure the rail network whilst people are waiting to be resettled. We believe that we must continue with our work to secure the network. And I can assure you that you are going to see the line open very soon for trains, whilst people are resettled to a new piece of land in the Western Cape. Myself and the Minister of Human Settlement are meeting tomorrow to finalize the preparations of the land that has been secured by government. So we are working tirelessly. We have been working to move people from rail tracks in the Western Cape. And the main issue, as you will know, which is an obstacle, an impediment in the Western Cape, is securing land parcels, which has been a bigger challenge here. The Department of Public Works did give us a piece of land, but when we went to occupy the land, we were also met with another court interdict, particularly from the owners of land. So the question of land in the Western Cape, it's a question of ownership. Those who own the land versus those who don't have. And then the people who own the land are those who are very rich and wealthy, and they will not easily agree to give us the land to be occupied by people who will be moving from the tracks in Langa and the areas we have actually mentioned. But finally, we do have a piece of land. We're going to move people. Even before we do that, the work of getting the trains running in the central line has started. And you are going to see the trains running, the blue trains. You're going to see them back in the central line. And I'm very excited about that. So come with me as we embark on this journey. So I was with your people in the Western Cape, working with them, the DA government, working with your municipality, who are very cooperative, working with me to move people. So don't come in Parliament and howl. And because
Honourable Minister, your time is now expired.
Those parties to move people on the tracks of land. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The last supplementary question will be asked by the Honourable Sheikh Imam.
Minister, first of all, thank you. The matter at OR Tambo Airport is resolved, and all 105 porters are now working unhindered at the airport. Thank you very much. Minister, this rail network, if implemented, will go a long way. First of all, less damage to the roads, less accidents, less fatalities. So I think there are positive sides to it. However, my question is, have you done an assessment of what is then going to happen in terms of job losses and things with the long distance buses and the trucking industry and things? Have you done some kind of assessment on that to see that we don't lose jobs? Although I know jobs are going to be created because they're going to run from depot to depot and that kind of thing. Thank you.
Honourable Minister.
We do have the study of the World Bank in relation to the rail situation, particularly the passenger rail in South Africa, and that the current model in terms of financing sustainability of the rail network in South Africa is not sustainable. And that is why in our national white paper policy, we're talking about private sector investment, not privatization. And what it will mean is that we are now going to attract private money to come and support our work in the passenger rail network. And the details of that will be unpacked when we launch the national white paper rail policy for South Africa. It's the first that we're launching, which have been approved by Cabinet. We're also going to look into the branch lines, which are now not being utilized. If you talk about areas like Botshabelo and Tabanchu in the Free State, and many other areas, even in KwaZulu-Natal, Mafikeng, and Johannesburg, all those branch lines, as you look at them now, they are not being utilized. So we are going to work with the private sector to come to the party so that we activate those branch lines for both the purposes of passenger rail network and freight, in implementing and bringing to realization the policy of moving from road to rail. So the white paper in itself gives us enough space to realize the implementation of this policy. And when we launch it, like we said, we are going to have a unit that is going to see to its implementation. We have costed it, and most of the money is not going to come from public purse. It will be through working together with the private sector. The policy itself opens up a space for everybody to come to the party. So the future is bright from where we are now in terms of the rail situation of South Africa. And I think we will see also as we speak to different stakeholders in terms of the policy, already the appetite of them coming forward to participate practically in the implementation of the policy. It is quite encouraging. You are right. there are job losses, including with regard to Autopex at Prasa. And what we have said is that Autopex, it is Autopex, it has got lucrative routes in terms of transporting people and all of that. But at the end of the day, it is a liability.
Honorable Minister, your time has now expired.
How we want to deal with its sustenance and preserving jobs. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. Honorable members, we will now proceed to question 291 that has been asked by the Honorable Maotwe to the Minister of Public Enterprises. The Honorable Minister.
Thank you, Chairperson. The project that Honorable Maotwe refers to aims to develop and support the strategy of moving towards managed third-party access, as Minister Mbalula has just been referring to, on sections of Transnet's network, driving freight density, improving profitability on the network, and supporting the migration of traffic from road to rail. Transnet is therefore conducting a phased project regarding the sale of slots to enable private operators access to sections of the Transnet rail network. In the case of slot sales, the phased project is limited to the sale of operational access privileges in the form of slots, with no impact on the rail network ownership. Transnet Freight Rail will continue to be the network owner and the network manager, in addition to being the dominant operator with what are called grandfather rights to the network. In all cases of private sector participation, Transnet retains the ownership of the asset. Transnet has also implemented a strategy for new capacity development and efficiency improvement. The strategy encompasses several private sector participation initiatives in concert with Transnet's own direct investment. This strategy involves private partners supporting capacity development and operational efficiency enhancement through the crowding in of investment in ring-fenced assets, partner-driven investment in equipment, tools, techniques, and access to international trade and commercial networks. Private sector participation processes currently underway include, amongst others, the Durban Container Terminal Pier 2, where a request for quotation has been issued. Secondly, the Ngqura Container Terminal, where also a request for quotation has been issued. And thirdly, the Ngqura and Richards Bay liquefied natural gas import terminals. In both instances, requests for information phases have been completed. Transnet is also developing and pursuing a program of branch line concessions in line with what Minister Mbalula has just said. This process is at various stages of development and implementation. The service that Transnet is selling is access to the network rather than a complete rail service. A detailed registration, capacitation, validation, and certification process has been developed to manage the process of private sector operators being allowed to bid for slots, as was initiated on the 1st of April 2022. It is important to note that the sale of slots is not a privatization process, but is a service offering from Transnet, albeit utilizing a different operating model. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. The Honorable Maotwe.
Thank you very much, House Chair. Minister, you've just said that part of the tracks might be out for concession. And that on its own is privatization. I don't know how do you not understand that term. Now, it is very clear that the ruling party has no interest or appetite to lead industrialization despite the high levels of unemployment, where more than 7.9 million people who are willing to work, willing to relocate anywhere in the country, and willing to learn in new industries cannot find work. More than 3.8 million have given up on finding work, and even more people are not economically active. We know that there is a deliberate program to collapse state-owned enterprises so that they can be sold to cronies for a fraction of their true value. They are deliberately destroying Transnet so that they can privatize it. Now we want you, Minister, today to confirm whether or not You are saying that there are no plans to privatize any of the Transnet sections in the medium to long term. I thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Chairperson. Privatization is a process where if you have 30,000 kilometers of rail in South Africa, you say, I am putting every kilometer of rail on sale to the private sector. This is not what is happening. I've just said in my initial response, Chairperson, for all to hear, that the railway owner remains Transnet, the principal railway operator remains Transnet, that all that is being experimented with here is that if, for example, on a particular corridor, 70 trains are to pass in the day, whereas there is potential for 80 trains, then the other 10 can be made available to the private sector for a period of time. And this will then teach us some lessons about how government and the private sector can cooperate. So I don't know whose confusion it is, certainly not mine, that this is not privatization. This is a service offering, as my initial response said. We are very aware as government that unemployment is a major issue in South Africa. And what is important in creating jobs in South Africa is that we need investment. And to get investment in South Africa, we need to create a climate of stability that welcomes investment in South Africa. So I think some of us, Honorable Chair, need to look in the mirror and ask the question, am I creating and contributing to stability in this country and creating a climate where I can actually get investment that will create jobs and therefore industrialization as well? This is an old, tired rhetoric that we've heard time and again about collapsing SOEs and selling them to somebody or the other, which requires no response whatsoever, because that is not the intention at all. And Honorable Maotwe knows that, and this is mere political rhetoric for its own sake. Thank you, Chairperson.
Honorable members, thank you, Honorable Minister. Honorable members, you know, when you ask a question, you do it with a reason to get a response or answer to your question. It doesn't assist us that while the Honorable Minister is replying to the follow-up question, that you just switch on your mic and you interject, and there's other ministers also now in the House who are ordinary members who are also responding at the same time. It doesn't assist the process. These are quite serious matters that we are dealing with, and let's give each other sufficient space to respond to and deal with the matters at hand. The next follow-up question is to be asked by the Honorable Dlamini.
Thanks, Chair. I think the issue of privatization has been well explained. In terms of the private sector participation in the rail network, how is it going to assist in terms of security, knowing that currently we have a spate of theft of our rail and the security around the railway line, and the nodes that have been identified, are they busy now with what? Thanks, Chair.
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Honourable Dlamini, for your question. This might not be, if you like, a direct assistance in this particular instance, but this is part of the conversation that Transnet and interested parties from the private sector will be having in regard to the specific issue of the availability of slots. However, if we look at this, let's call it the coal line from Ermelo to the Richards Bay, there the coal industry has played a very active part in contributing to the security of parts of that line that needs to be extended further, to ensure that there are drones operated for parts of the line, to ensure that there are security deterrents for anybody who wants to interfere with the signaling system or engage in copper theft or other equipment theft as well. And that is the kind of cooperation that we would like to see on all the rail corridors, and I'm sure Minister Mbalula would like to see that in relation to PRASA as well. There is absolutely no doubt, Honorable Dlamini, as you point out, that copper theft and rail theft and other infrastructure theft and vandalism is having a major and disastrous effect on the efficiency of logistics in South Africa. And we are certainly working also with the South African Police Service to ensure that special teams are made available at appropriate points where these vandalization projects are run in order to ensure that we understand who's behind it. And I want to reiterate that it is my firm view that the export of scrap metal must be banned for a while, for a start. And that will ensure that there's no market externally for the theft or those sorts of infrastructure that are in fact stolen or vandalized in one way or another. And of course, this is a matter that the DTIC is working on. And the sooner we have a strong set of measures in that particular regard, I believe it will begin to change the face of theft of infrastructure as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. The next follow-up question is the Honourable Kachalia.
Can the Minister detail the terms and details of the discussions that have been going on, been in progress since April 2021? And please do not recite the mantra of sensitive commercial information. The nation needs to know. Perhaps he'll tell us who's going to absorb the costs of the dereliction of infrastructure while signing up to a 2-year contract, while government retains ownership. Hospital pass much?
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Chairperson. I didn't hear the last sentence or two that Honourable Kachalia, unless it's a throwaway line.
Honourable Kachalia, don't be unfair. While the Minister is still trying to ask you, you already switch on your microphone against the rules again, and you simply carry on. That's not acceptable, sir. Will you just repeat the last part of your question so that the Minister can respond to you, please?
I'm not sure where the last part begins, but I'll say perhaps he will tell us who's going to absorb the costs of the destruction and dereliction of infrastructure while signing up to a 2-year contract, while government retains ownership thereof. And my last thing that he didn't hear was question: is this a hospital pass much?
The Honourable Minister, I hope you got the part that you couldn't hear now.
Yes, which I'll ignore for now, Chairperson. Thank you very much. I don't have the terms and details in front of me, but the discussions or the process was initiated in April 2022, not 2021. So it's a fairly new process. Secondly, I'm aware that Transnet has had various forms of feedback from interested private sector parties, some of which has been publicized in the press as well. Thirdly, the initial proposition from Transnet was A, the availability of slots, B, the use of their own equipment from the private sector, and C, on what is called a footstool basis, meaning as the railway infrastructure stands at the moment. However, Chairperson, I think we're all aware that certainly in KwaZulu-Natal, as a result of the recent floods and the damage that has been caused to infrastructure generally, but to human life as well, and in this particular instance to the railway infrastructure, the railway line between eThekwini and Cato Ridge won't be operational for quite a while. It's currently undergoing serious evaluation, and various processes are in place in order to, as rapidly as possible, like Transnet did on the Bayhead Road within the Durban Harbour, to restore the line to full functionality. And that answers the question about the state of the infrastructure. And I am sure that Transnet and the interested parties will have further conversations about the 2-year contract or anything that pertains to that as well. If Mr. Kachalia has the necessity for any further information, he can ask a written or put forward a written parliamentary question, and we'll certainly make the details available. And if there is any commercial requirement not to pass on information at this stage, we'll let him know at that point in time. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. The last supplementary question is to be asked by the Honourable Buthelezi.
Thank you, Chairperson. Honourable Minister, considering that infrastructure is not a movable asset, what other benefits are being offered to attract private sector's investors? Please, can you provide full detail? Thank you very much.
The question was asked on behalf of the Honourable Buthelezi. Thank you. Honourable Minister.
I think it's well accepted, Honourable Member who asked the question on behalf of Honourable Buthelezi, that infrastructure is not a movable asset. But I imagine that, for example, if there is an investor that wants to co-invest with Transnet in the new pier that needs to be developed in the Durban Harbour, which will require deepening of the harbour. It will require the reclamation of some of the harbour land, so to speak, and would involve a fair number of billions of rands in order to actually undertake. That will provide an additional facility, for example, for a shipping line that wants to move certain types of goods or containers in and out of Durban and utilize it as its hub or as a convenient offloading point as well. So to the best of my knowledge, there's a number of operators within the maritime sector that have demonstrated interest in, for example, that kind of project. And they will have worked out that there are benefits for themselves in contributing to the infrastructure, as many have done in other parts of Africa and other parts of the world as well, in order to create a more sophisticated port environment, both in terms of infrastructure, but also in terms of equipment like cranes, straddles, etc., which would benefit not only the ships that end up in that particular harbor, but also the terminal operations that this particular entity might want to conduct. So there are a range of benefits from an infrastructure point of view, but also from a trade point of view and a shipping point of view that various parties will be interested in. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. Honourable Members, question number 248 has been asked by the Honourable L.F. Chabalala to the Minister of Public Works and Infrastructure. The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Honourable Chairperson. Thank you, Honourable Chabalala, for the question. As of the end of March 2022, the presidential employment stimulus has supported 869,942 jobs and livelihood opportunities since the program was launched in October 2020. The breakdown is jobs created 677,675, jobs retained 40,399, and livelihood supported 151,868. This represents a total, represents 70% of the total stimulus targets across the two phases, with phase 2 still underway. The Department of Public Works and Infrastructure was part of phase 1, during which we have created 1,886 job opportunities for young professionals in the built environment. DPWI has also applied to the National Skills Fund in the Department of Higher Education and Training, and has secured funding which targets to train 8,300 EPWP participants. So the breakdown for the 8,300 is Artisans Development Program 400, Learnerships 450, Accredited Skills Program 7,000, Capacity Building 450. Furthermore, DPWI has partnered with the Financial Sector Conduct Authority to capacitate EPWE participants on financial literacy matters. And in the 22-23 financial year, a total of 4,750 participants will be capacitated through financial education. Further, we also, through EPWP, through the infrastructure sector, is developing skills by training youth in artisans trades through the National Youth Service Program. And in terms of entrepreneurs, DPWI, we are collaborating with some public bodies implementing the Vukepile Learnership Program, which trains contractors to implement infrastructure projects that are labor intensive. And for this year, we're planning to do 70 contractors. All of this contributes to the enhancement of employment in the construction and infrastructure delivery in the country. And we also provide non-financial support to EPWP participants that aim to start and undertake their own businesses. This support is through the training on a program called Start and Improve Your Business. And in 22-23 financial year, we plan to support 205 participants. Chairperson, through this various training initiatives, EPWP endeavors to empower women, youth, and people living with disabilities to improve their employability. I thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. I've been informed that the Honourable S.R. van Schalkwyk will take charge of the first parliamentary question on behalf of the Honourable Chabalala. And this is in line with Rule 137, Sub-Rule 10, Paragraph A. Honourable van Schalkwyk.
Thank you, Honourable Chairperson. Honourable Minister, thank you for your response in terms of this question. Taking into account the current economic environment, especially with regards to the high unemployment that we have in terms of the youth, the women and people with disability, it's encouraging that you are taking into account those designated groups when you identify them for employment opportunities. And we welcome also the initiative of the EPWP, the Expanded Public Works Program, which are really a welcome relief for the needy and the poor. But, Honourable Minister, we have a challenge in terms of these initiatives. There's no real transfer of skills taking place, and which limits the employability of these individuals partaking in these programs. So I want to ask, Honourable Minister, you've already indicated the opportunities that has been created, but what are your five-year targets that you've set, and whether the department will indeed attain those targets that has been set? Thank you very much.
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Honourable van Schalkwyk. Indeed, the total employment target for the 5-year MSDF is 5 million work opportunities. The EPWP funding does not include training. So we apply for training funding from the Skills Development Fund in the Department of Education. And then we partner with other private sector bodies to also provide skills. But we must remember too that we are also then passing on the money to the provinces, to municipalities, to the non-state sector, the NPO sector. And then those sectors then develop their own training skills within the EPWP program. I will agree with you that we need to begin to look at, because EPWP is temporary, sometimes only 6 months, that we maybe need to extend the period to 1 year to enable people to get their transfer of skills. But then you're going to reduce the number of opportunities for new people to come into the EPWP. But it is a concern that we need to address with the investment that government is making into EPWP. I thank you.
The next supplementary question will be asked by the Honorable Graham.
Thank you, House Chair. Minister, while it is admirable to speak of the 1,886 beneficiaries of the Presidential Employment Stimulus Program in the department and a target of 5 million potential job opportunities in the expanded Public Works Program, these go little way to address the scourge of unemployment in this country. In fact, 7.9 million people were unemployed by the end of 2021, with 278,000 more people joining the ranks of the unemployed in the last quarter. The second highest job losses emanated from the construction sector, with 35,000 people losing their jobs. Job seekers in the 15 to 24 years band sit at a staggering 66%. Work opportunities are not jobs. They are a form of social grant, a stipend at half the rate of the minimum wage in return for 8 days of work a month. No child grows up dreaming of becoming an EPWP worker. We have to do more than work opportunities. Minister, what are you doing to create real, sustainable jobs that support people and their families, as opposed to mere work opportunities that are merely a form of poverty alleviation? Thank you.
Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Honourable Graham Murray. I will agree with you that the intention of EPWP is to assist with poverty relief. And so does government come to the help of the poor and the unemployed in many other ways, in terms of grants, the 350 social distress of relief grants. There are many of these assistance to poor people. In terms of the creating sustainable job, it is the responsibility of both the public sector and the private sector to create jobs. And therefore, government must create the conditions conducive and the environment conducive for the private sector to create jobs by investing in infrastructure. And that is exactly what we are doing. We are leading by investing in infrastructure and then getting the crowding in effect by the private sector to create jobs. And I must say that in terms of infrastructure, government has already launched an infrastructure investment plan. We have gazetted more than 62 investment plans. In a question later on, I will give the breakdown of what we have completed of infrastructure and also what is still under construction. So that is the contribution from the Department of Public Works and Infrastructure. But also in terms of the economic reconstruction and recovery plan. There again, infrastructure, the President has identified as the flywheel of the economy. So with the partnership with the private sector and us going up to the investment conferences, raising funding, because we can't get all the funding out of the fiscus for the projects, but we have been successful in June of 2020, where we've been able to raise 304 billion rand for infrastructure from the private sector. And that is the partnership that we are continuing to grow to create more sustainable, proper jobs. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. The next supplementary question will be asked by the Honourable Sukas.
Thank you, Chair. Honourable Minister, would the Minister kindly tell the House how the crises currently brought about by the floods in KZN would be utilized to maximize the opportunity it represents for job creation in line with government programs such as the EPW program, to one, put together a comprehensive recruitment strategy to repair and rebuild the province over the next 2-year period, using the opportunity of infrastructure rebuilds and repair of basic services to advance the goals of skills development by employing graduates and unemployed youth, thereby ensuring that the disaster funds have both short-term and long-term value, aligned with the goals of programs to upskill and create employment of especially young people. Thank you.
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Honourable Chairperson. Like I've said, that The local municipalities in KZN, the provincial government, MEC, Sabia of Public Works and Human Settlements, they have designed specific projects for the KZN floods that will be driven by the province and the municipalities to help with the clearing of the mud and general work opportunities for EPWP. In terms of the graduates, the Department of Public Works and Infrastructure, in terms of our rural bridge project, which we have now identified 18 for the current financial year, plus another 6. And just yesterday, I received a request for another 28 rural bridges that were destroyed in KZN. And there we bring in the young professionals, the interns that we have paid for bursaries to go to universities. We take them out to these projects of the rural bridges together with the Department of Defense so that they can get the transfer of skills and training on the job. So there's a good coordination between eThekwini and the other municipalities. We are providing multidisciplinary professional skills, quantity surveyors, architects, engineers to assist the municipalities just to do the assessment of the floods in KZN. And that report has been submitted. We are now in the process. I'm going back to KZN tomorrow, where we are handing over 3 bridges that we've completed. And then also to take a look at the government buildings. 40 government buildings were destroyed with the floods, and we have done the assessment, and again, it will create job opportunities with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. The last supplementary question will be asked by the Honourable Hendricks.
Thank you very much, Honourable House Chair. Honourable House Chair, it is quite clear that employment for the poor is in the Minister's department. I would like to know from the Minister whether she has the capacity and the energy to take responsibility for full employment for the poor. Thank you very much.
Honourable Minister.
I certainly have the energy, Honourable Hendricks. I think as a collective, both at all 3 spheres of government, the responsibility is enshrined in our constitution that we all have got a responsibility to deal with socio-economic rights of our people. And therefore, I think working together, we will be able to make a dent in poverty if we work together and put all our resources and manpower and energy together. I certainly have the energy, I can promise you that. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. Honourable Members, question number 267 has been asked by the Honourable S.S. Zondo to the Minister of Public Works and Infrastructure. The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Honourable Chairperson, and thank you to Honourable Zondo. I was in KZN 2 weeks ago, Honourable Chairperson, and we have identified 616 land parcels, which we then had to go through.
Sorry, I got my question in.
Honourable Hendricks, your microphone is on. Please switch off your microphone, Honourable Hendricks. Honourable Minister, will you just start from afresh again?
Yes. I was in KZN 2 weeks ago, Honourable Chairperson, and we have identified on our immovable asset register 616 parcels of land. We then had to do verification and also do suitability in terms of a criteria to see whether it's suitable to be used for land resettlement. After we have done the desktop exercise, it has been reduced to 258 land parcels from Public Works and Infrastructure. KZN government has also contributed 193 parcels of land, and then we are still waiting on the Metropolitan eThekwini to give us their list of parcels of land from their immovable asset register. But the criteria that we have applied to make sure that the land is suitable and to exclude those parcels of land that are not suitable was whether we had dams nearby, encroachment, fences, whether it's illegally occupied, whether it was zoned for parking, protected areas, public spaces, or for railways, rivers, road reserves, servitudes, harbors, water canals, and especially whether it is a wetland. So that is the criteria that we have applied. We've also excluded pieces of land which was earmarked for human settlements development. And tomorrow, when I go back to the province, we will be meeting with the MEC and the Department of Human Settlements that will be responsible for building the top structures. The municipality will be responsible for providing the bulk infrastructure like water, sanitation, and electricity. So it is a collaborative effort by all three spheres of government to try and resettle communities as soon as possible. We're also engaging with the communities in terms of social facilitation to inform them about the options of resettlement. As we know, our communities don't like to be too far away from where they currently live, and the Human Settlements Department and HTA is busy with that process. I thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. The first supplementary question will go to the Honourable S.S. Zondo.
Thanks for your response, Honourable Minister. As no time should be spared in bringing the immediately house relief to those who lost their homes as a result of recent devastating floods in KZN. Honourable Minister, your department has also identified a number of state-owned buildings that were damaged by the floods, which include magistrates' courts, police stations, military base, and museums. How soon can we expect the repair of these buildings to be completely? And what interim measures are in place that will ensure that the service delivered from this affected department continues, especially as regarded the magistrate court and police station? Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Honourable Zondo. Yes, we have completed the assessment of all the 49 buildings, including the KZN Museum. We have deployed 108 professionals internally and externally from the private sector and 4 multidisciplinary teams that are helping us to do the assessments quickly. The multidisciplinary teams are also helping other municipalities to do their assessments. We have started the procurement for 30 of the buildings, and I will get a feedback tomorrow about the other 19 buildings. But the assessments has been done, and we're working as fast as we can, follow due process, doing due diligence, making sure that we follow all the processes of National Treasury in proceeding with procurement to repair these buildings. So I will give the Honourable Member an update from time to time as to where we are. We have also assisted the Air Force Base that was completely flooded with mud and rain to get generators in for them, to help them to clean up the Air Force Base, and also to secure the fence of the Air Force Base, because some of those containers were blown right over the highway into the Air Force Base. So it's all work in progress. Thank you, Honourable Member.
Thank you, Minister. The next supplementary question will be asked by the Honourable van Schalkwyk.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. Minister, you've just explained to us how many land parcels has originally been identified, but that number has now been decreased, and you are venturing now into the local and provincial sphere to establish more land parcels. What other avenues are you going to use if you don't find
Number one. Number one.
Honorable Mamupelo.
Honorable
Mamupelo. Your microphone is on and we can hear your discussion. Please switch it off. Honorable Van Schalkwyk, you can continue.
Yes, thank you, Honorable Chair. Can you give us an indication of what avenues you might be using to ensure that you did satisfy the need? And will that be...
Number one. Let's close out this. Number one. Let's close out.
Order, honorable members, order. Honorable Mamupelo, please ensure your microphone is off. Otherwise, you will be removed from the platform. Continue, honorable member.
Will it now mean, Minister, the original time frame that you indicated will now be amended, taking into consideration that you are struggling to secure the relevant parcels? Thank you.
Honorable Minister, I hope you, with all these interruptions, you got the gist of the question.
Yes, no, Honourable Member van Schalkwyk, there will be no delays. In fact, 2 days after the floods, we were able to start the identification process. What I was saying is that National is contributing 258. The province contributing 193 land parcels. eThekwini must still add their land parcels to it. The process that we will follow is that once the Human Settlements Department has identified and that they've got their plans ready, their business plan ready, at that stage, we will then transfer the land gratis, either to the municipalities or to the provincial government. So no, we are on track. And if we should run out of land parcels, I will approach Minister Pravin Gordhan and see if the state-owned entities don't have any land there, and also the Minister of Transport to see if any land is available from him. Thank you.
The next supplementary question is to be asked by the Honourable Herron.
Thank you, House Chair, and thank you, Minister. Minister, public land belongs to all South Africans. It is held in custody on our behalf by different spheres of government and state-owned entities to be used for land reform and other land needs in our country. There are devastating floods in KwaZulu-Natal, but there are precarious and vulnerable communities across our country. I think to some extent with regards to KZN, you've answered my question, but what role is being played by state-owned entities and other spheres of government with regards to addressing land reform and land needs in our country? Thank you.
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Honourable Herron. Honourable Chairperson, the land reform agenda is based on the Presidential Advisory Panel recommendations, of which government has accepted 85% of the recommendations. So in terms of that, you will look at land reform or land distribution, land restitution, and also land tenure. And again, there's an interministerial committee chaired by the Deputy President, where we report on a monthly basis about the pace of land that must be released. I can tell you that for human settlements since 2019, we have released 13,185 properties. For restitution, 204 properties, and then also another 120 properties for tenure. So that is, if we want to have a successful land reform program in our country, we cannot just rely on the land that's owned by national government. There's already, Minister Pravin Gordhan has already come to the table and has said land parcels belonging to state-owned entities that they are willing and able to release to form part of the land reform program. But we need to get into the provincial immovable assets of every province. I'm busy doing that. I know exactly what every province has got on the asset register. We now need to turn to all the metropolitans in the country and see what land they are sitting with. Because we can't have land reform and at the same time municipalities are selling of land, well-located land to developers. So the coordination at the interministerial committee, I know what's available in Cape Town, if you can just keep quiet.
The point of order. Order, honorable members. Order. Honorable Minister, let me just hear why this honorable member is rising. Will you take your seat, honorable minister? Honorable member, why are you rising?
I think the minister must not send direct messages to
No, that's not a point of order, honorable member. It's not a point of order. Order, honorable members. Honorable Minister, you have a few seconds left to conclude your response.
Thank you. I'm pleading, Chairperson, that all three spheres of government must release land for land reform and don't just point the finger at national government. Thank you.
Thank you, honorable Minister. The last supplementary question will go to the Honorable Sheikh Imam.
Thank you. Honorable Minister, has your department done an exercise as to exactly how much of land is available in South Africa from all spheres of government that might be suitable for housing, given the fact that, and I think you're aware of it, that many of these municipalities, Cape Town, I think, has got about 500,000, eThekwini's got about 500,000, all on waiting list. And secondly, and this is a problem countrywide, Minister, and I'm asking this so that we could ensure we make land available for housing throughout the country instead of allowing people to live under dangerous terms. But very importantly, a Jackie Joseph from Sitsikama has been writing to your department, land that fell under the former Prime Minister John Foster. 15 hectares are standing there, and he's looking to grow hemp, he's looking to be able to grow wheat. He's written to your department since 2020 and no response. If you haven't received that, Minister, I request that you can get that information and that correspond to him. Thank you, ma'am.
The Honorable Minister.
Thank you, Honorable Sheikh Imam. Certainly, I would like to see that correspondence and go and investigate what was the response from the department. Because in terms of GIAMA, the Government Immovable Asset Management Act, there is a process to be followed where people have to make an application and then it goes through public participation and all of that. And I will appreciate if the member can assist me with that information. Well, 2 state land audits has been done, and I have answered in many parliamentary questions the details of the state land audits. The one was done in 2014 and the one in 2017. If you look at that land audit, you will see exactly what amount of hectares of land will we need to transform and to make sure that we integrate our country. So the audits are there, but we need to take now our lead from the National Spatial Development Framework that will be approved shortly. And that National Spatial Development Framework must guide us where we must build houses. What is zoned for agriculture? What is zoned for commercial? Because the time is long overdue. 28 years in our democracy, we must integrate this country and especially our cities. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. Honorable members, question number 257 has been asked by the Honorable Chabalala to the Minister of Public Enterprises.
Thank you, Chairperson, and thanks to Honorable Chabalala. The Transnet Freight Rail's historical underinvestment in infrastructure and maintenance backlog dating back to the 1990s has resulted in an aged and unreliable network that does not support the efficient movement of trains. Whilst this constraint impacts Transnet's ability to fully exploit the increasing demand for coal, the interventions that TFR, as it is called, has put into place to deal with the maintenance backlog has started to show some improvement. In recent months, TFR has ramped up maintenance on the North Corridor with up to 26 planned maintenance events per day, with major maintenance activities conducted during the annual shutdown plan for July 2022. A significant amount of work has been undertaken internally to improve procurement timeframes for key contracts, which have been a significant cause for delays in the past. The finalization of major bulk materials and on-track machine contracts has led to faster and more efficient resolution of historical and new maintenance issues as they arise. Given the increased focus on maintenance on the corridor, TFR expects to increase or remove 42% of the current speed restrictions by the end of July. This will mean that an additional 6 slots will be restored, which will result in more volumes for both the customer and TFR itself. However, to take full advantage of the opportunities that are available and to decrease the cost of conducting business in South Africa, we must urgently restore the network back to an acceptable international A standard. With some 30,000 track kilometers, this would require massive investment, which the other constraint to our performance is the unavailability of locomotives to service the corridor. The impact of setting aside the 1064 locomotive program has reduced Transnet Freight Rail's overall system capacity for the transportation of coal to Richards Bay Coal Terminal from an annual capacity of 77 million tons to an annual capacity of 60 million tons. Thank you, Chairperson. You're muted, Chairperson.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. Thank you, Honorable Chief Whip of the Majority Party. The first supplementary question will be asked by Honorable Jay Shabalala from the Chamber.
No, I'm not Jay Shabalala, but I'll take the question.
You are replacing her.
Yes.
You may proceed, Honorable Member.
With reference to the government's limited funding for the state-owned corporations, in what ways will Transnet implement structural reforms intended to build private sector confidence and engage in new infrastructure investment in the context of public and public-private partnerships? Thanks, Chair.
Honorable the Minister.
Thank you, Honorable Dlamini. Chairperson, structural reforms is a very important part and very central to the reforms that we require in South Africa and which are currently monitored in the presidency through Operation Vulindlela. Key amongst those has been firstly the establishment of the Transnet National Ports Authority, which was done last year as an independent subsidiary of Transnet. And the Ports Authority plays a very important part as landlord on the one hand, but ushering in ships and providing other services at our ports. The second element in this particular regard is to extend the port facilities, for example, at Durban, but at other ports as well, through investment both by Transnet, which has limited finances, and through private sector participation as well. And I've made reference to this earlier in the day in relation to the new terminal proposed at the Durban Harbour, at Nuka, at Richards Bay, and later at other ports as well, including East London. And those reforms will also assist particularly exporters and importers in various parts of the country. The third element is to restore, as I've just indicated, the rail capacity and the rail efficiency to a completely new level and to an international standard. That will ensure that rail operations become truly efficient and become cost effective for the commercial sector to utilize instead of roads, as we discussed earlier in the afternoon. And that will change the picture as far as logistics in South Africa is concerned by moving the transportation of goods from road to rail as well. Similarly, other structural reforms are also planned. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. The second supplementary question would be asked by Honorable Kachalia.
It's common cause that Transnet Rail and Ports woes have contributed to huge losses in potential earnings to our coal miners. Even as global constraints on supply, a surge in prices for thermal coal of at least 46% in Asia and rocketing gas prices are the order of the day. In belated recognition of this public enterprise failure, government is now seeking private sector involvement, which we applaud. Will the minister, though, without tired reference to force majeure, the eventuality of which we warned against time and time again, tell us by what date, on what term?
And Honorable Kachalia, may the front table assist us. If there's anyone that switched off the mic, please just mute him or eject him if he does it for the second time. Thank you very much. You may proceed.
Thank you. Will the minister, though, without tired reference to force majeure, the eventuality of which we warned against time and time again, tell us by what date and on what terms the much needed private sector onboarding will take place?
Honorable the Minister.
Thank you, Chairperson, and thanks to Honorable Kachalia. The fact that there is a huge demand for coal is certainly an acknowledged fact, particularly arising from the current events in Europe, but also the increased demand for coal in the eastern part of the world as well. And of course, there's been increased profits for coal miners as a result of the increase in coal prices as well. I've just explained that due to limitations, firstly on the security front, secondly in terms of the absence of the complete set of 1064 locomotives and inefficiencies within the rail system itself, including vandalism. All of these factors have conspired against Transnet Rail being able to do its best in this particular regard. The reference to force majeure, it's not a tired reference, was in fact a basis upon which the coal companies and Transnet have been negotiating a new set of contracts and addenda to contracts, the status of which should have reached a point where there's some finalization between the two parties, but I'm not totally briefed on that at this stage. And nobody can say exactly what date and on what terms the private sector participation will occur. The process has been initiated. The RFIs and RFQs and so on have been issued. Those need to be properly processed. They need to be diligently examined. And finally, negotiations need to take place between the chosen parties and Transnet to the satisfaction of both. So at this point in time, let us say that that is a process that is in motion. And once we have greater clarity, we can certainly advise Parliament on that. Thank you.
Thank you. The third supplementary question. Honorable members, point of order.
Chair, I didn't want to disturb the minister because he was reading very carefully, but it's very clear that when the ANC ask a minister a question, they have a prepared answer to read. But when a member of the opposition asks, then they have nothing to read. And it really makes a mockery of this question session.
Okay.
Point of order, Chairperson of the session, Judith Chabalala virtual.
Honorable JT, allow me just to
Thank
handle
you.
it a little bit. Thank you very much.
It's out of order, thanks.
Honorable Fixen, you know very well that is not a point of order. It's a point of debate in your perception. Shall we proceed and take the supplementary question? The third supplementary question will be asked by Honorable Mautwe. Honorable Mautwe. Order, honorable members. Honorable Mautwe, may we allow the honorable member to be heard, if possible, please? Honorable members, you can do better than that, please. Honorable members, order, please. Honorable Mautwe, we may ask your question.
Thank you very much, Chair. Well, Chair, the minister just said that because of the decision they took of suspending the 1064 program, it has led to the reduction of the tonnages. Now, that's a no-brainer, hey? I mean, you can do better than that. So, what are you still waiting for? Why can't you take back some of the locomotives in service? Now, my question is, Minister, the Minerals Council of South Africa reported that coal investments in the country saw a decrease of over 2 billion rands between 2010 and 2018. There's also pressure from civil society organizations who are litigating against the use of coal, as well as the global pressure to transition from coal to renewable energy. Now, realistically speaking, what impacts do all these attempts to limit mining cumulatively have on the ability of Transnet to reposition itself as a global leader in rail transportation for goods? Thank you, Chair.
Honorable the Minister.
Thank you, Chair. With reference to the honourable member from the DA, as you correctly pointed out, it's his perception, but perhaps it's his delusion as well. The follow-up questions are not with prepared answers. They are spontaneous answers, just for your information. And one day, when you might or might not become a minister, you'll realize that. In reference to Honourable Mautwe, I'm not sure what is the no-brainer. If a manufacturer or OEM doesn't deliver fully, and I've given some of the details earlier as well, the 1064 locomotives that were required, and where they are delivery of some of these locomotives, they are deficient in one respect or another, I'm not sure what you take back. So the fact of the matter is that the country and the coal industry understand that there's a shortage as far as locomotives are concerned, and that limits the capacity of Transnet Rail to do the work that it is required to do. As far as coal is concerned, and the just energy transition is concerned, Chairperson, it is fairly clear, both from the IRP 19, but also discussions at COP26 and future discussions at future COPs as well, that coal will be a part of the global energy system, although on a declining basis for some time to come. And our responsibility in South Africa is to contribute to a decarbonization process. And if all of the other work that is being done within Transnet, in the next couple of years, Transnet will return itself to a world-class logistics company. And I'm quite confident of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. The last supplementary question, honorable members, will be asked by Honorable Buthelezi.
It will be asked by Zondo on behalf of Honorable Buthelezi.
You may proceed, honorable member, but you must note that what is written here in terms of your submission, it says Buthelezi, but nevertheless proceed.
Honorable Minister, given the global debate on phasing out of fossil fuel and the phasing in of all emissions related technology, in line with the ultimate goal of reducing emissions to reduce the global warming, and the fact that ESCOM generates the bulk of its electricity from coal-fired power station, does the department have plans in place to not only profit from the use of coal, but also to invest in the technology to achieve the balance of reducing the climate change as advised by the UN Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change? Please provide full details. Thank you.
Thank you. Honorable the Minister.
Honorable Zondo, thank you very much. Government, as has been indicated on various occasions, most recently last year, prior to the COP26 event that took place in Glasgow, where the president signed a statement together with several other world leaders. Government is committed to reducing the usage of fossil fuels. It is true that 41% approximately of carbon emissions in South Africa is through the production of electricity. And that is why Eskom, for some time now, has been preparing its own just energy transition. That is how it will decommission certain power stations and ensure at the same time that under the umbrella of the IRP 19, there is a replacement of the megawatts that will be lost as a result of the decommissioning of coal power stations. So that balance and that roadmap is certainly in place. And as soon as money is available, you've heard about the $8.5 billion that certain countries have made available for some elements of the costs of this transition process, including the retraining of workers, both in coal mines, but particularly at power stations. Those are all contributions towards reducing carbon emissions in South Africa and meeting the target of 1.5 degrees that South Africa has committed itself to. Eskom itself, of course, does not profit from the utilization of coal. The coal industry certainly does profit from the selling of coal, both to Eskom and to the world as well. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. Question number 277 has been asked by Honorable Macpherson to the Minister of Trade and Industry and Competition. We have been informed that the Minister will be answering the question from the chamber. Honorable Minister.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Honorable Macpherson, honorable members. Food prices have gone up sharply both in South Africa and globally. According to the Food and Agriculture Organization's database, between February and March this year, global food prices saw the largest single month increase in more than 30 years. South Africa imports about 84 billion rands worth of agriculture and food products annually. So these trends affect local consumers very substantially. The World Bank about 9 days ago issued a food security brief that identifies a number of causes driving food prices, and it's worth quoting. They say, even before COVID-19 reduced incomes and disrupted supply chains, chronic and acute hunger were on the rise due to various factors, including conflict, socioeconomic conditions, natural hazards, climate change, and pests. The impact of the war in Ukraine adds risk to global food security, with food prices likely to remain high for the foreseeable future and expected to push millions of additional people into food insecurity. And then they go on and provide information, for example, that as of April 2022, the agricultural price index is up 43% compared to January 2021. Maize and wheat prices are 56% and 55% higher respectively, while rice prices are the only ones that have come down by 17%. They continue by saying the war in Ukraine is a major shock for global commodity markets affecting wheat, maize, edible oils, and fertilizers. And then they provide information on the extent of fertilizer price rises, 20% up since January, 3 times higher compared to a year ago. These are extraordinary increases. I can add, of course, the impact of rising oil prices that will affect the entire food value chain. Domestic supply chains were also affected by, among others, COVID-19, and the recent floods in KZN will have a significant impact on food prices. On the other hand, the data seems to suggest that food prices of locally produced products have increased at a slower rate than the number of imported items over the last 3 months. Favorable weather and good local crops for certain products have also assisted to keep prices lower than they otherwise would have been, except, of course, now with the floods. To address high food prices, government has taken a number of measures. I want to highlight a few. First, we've supported efforts to scale up local production of food products in both agriculture and food processing. This included the announcement of a special fund by Delrad and IDC to support local farmers, by PepsiCo to support small-scale farmers, and by the DTIC to sugar farmers affected by the July 2021 unrest. Local retailers have been encouraged to support local producers. DTIC supported the building of a new 1.3 billion rand edible oil refinery plant in Richards Bay. Second, The competition authorities have been monitoring food markets, which included an investigation into sudden price rises, as was the case with garlic and ginger, honorable members will recall, and it's now launched a market inquiry into fresh food produce, which will look at the structure of the market and whether that contributes to higher food prices. Third, the DTIC has put conditions to new tariff measures to contain price rises. Recent tariff adjustments have sought to peg price rises to no more than the rise in the CPI and or another appropriate price index. Fourth, National Treasury announced a reduction in the general fuel levy, which is expected to save 120 Rand each time a farmer fills up a Hilux bakkie. And finally, the DTIC and Dalrad has put industry partnerships together in the sugar and poultry sectors and cooperated with the citrus industry to address their concerns to expand South African exports of citrus fruits. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. The first supplementary question will be asked by Honorable Mafixen.
Thank you, Minister, for the comprehensive response. And I think that we can all agree that South Africans are battling and buckling under the price increases that they are being subjected to. And people are battling to feed their families. Children are going hungry. Malnutrition is on the increase. And it is really difficult for families across the length and breadth of the country. But the government has to shoulder some blame for the increases that we're seeing. For many, many years, government has put massive tariffs on many products into this country with the notion of trying to create industries while locking out imports into this country. And we've seen that with cement, with steel, poultry prices, administered prices by government contribute to the increase in goods and services in this country. Electricity increases are out of control, and so are water. So the government did the right thing, Minister, by relaxing the duty on fuel. That was the correct thing to do. So do you think that it's not the right thing to do to relax tariff and VAT on critical protein sources like poultry that feeds millions of South Africans and keeps hunger at bay for them? Thank you very much.
Honorable Minister.
Thank you for the supplementary question, Honorable McPherson. I think you're absolutely right that ordinary South Africans are battling to feed their families, and that we need to think of ways in which we can enhance quality of lives and bring down the price of basic foods. One of the challenges we face is the trade-off between jobs and prices. And in an area like the poultry industry, as an example, it's a significant employer of labor. We're trying to encourage many more small-scale black poultry farmers to come in and supply commercial markets. And so we've got to find that right balance to ensure that South Africans also have jobs at an unemployment rate that is really at about 40%. The job creation is absolutely fundamental, and we've got to address that. At the same time, I think you correctly point to a number of challenges with tariff increases. When tariffs on imported goods go up, there is the tendency, this is how markets work, when you create protection, in all likelihood, prices will rise. So what we're seeking to do now is to mitigate that by putting conditions to, for when applicants put in an application, to require them to commit not to increase prices beyond either the PPI or the CPI. That is one element of it. The other part is, of course, to increase supply. The law of demand and supply indicates that if you can produce many more products and scale up the quantities, you can bring down the unit prices. Energy remains an enormous challenge, and a deep industrialization of the food value chain would be enhanced as we overcome the energy blockages. And Minister Gordon is, of course, working very closely with Eskom to see how we can fix the institution and help to bring down the long-term energy price path. On the final issue that you've raised on VAT, I know that Minister Godongwana has an enormously difficult job. On the one hand, VAT generates the resources that pays, among others, for social grants, which is a key means. And I'm glad to see that there's cross-party support for these grants. And at the same time, he's got to be able to generate the taxes for that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. The second supplementary question will be asked by Honorable Mutaung from the chamber.
Thanks, House Chair. Minister, climate change poses a serious threat not only the environment, but also the livelihoods of millions of people around the globe. The recent floods in KZN are indicative of the extent to which livelihood can be destroyed in a matter of hours. According to the Pietermaritzburg Economic Justice Dignity Group, which has indicated that the natural disaster can occur in KZN, will mostly likely result in the increase in the price of basic foodstuffs in the near future. This is a view also articulated by Minister of Agriculture, Rural Development and Land Reform. Has the department done an analysis of the impact this will have on households? If not, why, and if so, what measures have the department put in place to mitigate against the further increase in food prices as anticipated? Thank you, House Chair.
Honorable the Minister.
Thank you very much, Honorable Mutaung, for that question. I agree with the work that's been done by the Pietermaritzburg Economic Justice Unit that identifies the impact of the floods on food prices. KZN is an enormous food basket for South Africa. In 2019, about close to a quarter of all agriculture value add was generated in KZN. It accounts, Honorable Mutaung, for about a third of the country's dairy herd, probably about 10% of poultry, and it's a significant employer also of workers and opportunity for small farmers. So we will see a price, Waterhouse-Cooper did some work on the likely impact, and they've identified a number of channels through which we may see price rises as a result of the floods. The first of this is obviously damage that the floods have caused on agricultural lands. In the sugar industry, I've seen calculations by the sugar growers of damage of more than 200 million rand. The second leg of it is in logistics. Port, rail line, Minister Gordon pointed to the rail line disruption that the floods have caused between KZN and Gauteng, and of course initial damage at the port that has now been largely addressed. The third channel is at the factory level, both food factories, but also the suppliers of critical inputs into food, like fertilizer. There's a very large fertilizer factory in KwaZulu-Natal, the Fosco factory. And so all of these are likely to have an impact. The DTIC has worked with KZN province to do a survey to identify the extent of damage and what it will take to turn that around and how soon it can be done. As that survey is completed, we would have a better sense of the actual steps that would need to be taken, but a number of measures are already being rolled out to try to ensure that farmers and factory owners are able to get back to production as quickly as possible. And then finally, on the ports and logistics side, Minister Gordon and I went to KZN recently, and we did an evaluation of the main logistics lines and what it would take to be able to fix those much quicker than would normally be the case. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. The third question will be asked by Honorable Chaku from the virtual platform. Oh, you're in the house. Over to you, Honorable.
No, I'm here, Chair. No, thank you very much, Chair. Minister, I think this question says, what measures are taken in terms of cushioning the food? The South African consumers who are currently experiencing an increase in the price of food. So we want to give you the answer, or we want to actually give you, the suggestion. One of the proven ways of ensuring that the country develops internal capacity to stand on its own in the global trade is to develop the capacity for import in substituting industrialization. This will mean that we develop the capacity to produce and procure our own milk, our own chicken and other foodstuffs. Generally, we consume what we produce as far as practically possible. What steps have the department taken to ensure that we improve the ability of the country to produce the foodstuffs that we can produce instead of importing these from the other countries? I hope that from you, Minister, will get a simple answer, because sometimes you have a lot of paragraph that I really don't understand. I just joined you now. Hopefully, you'll just give us a proper answer.
Your time is
Thank
up.
you very much.
Thank you. Before, Honorable Minister, 1 minute, 1 second.
On a point of order, House Chair.
Point of order, Honorable Member.
Yes, the honorable member behind the latter speaker, can she put on her mask and stop being upset? Thank you.
Honorable members, in the beginning, we were urged, all of us, to put on our masks, and we don't need to be reminded. And I request all members to put on their mask. Thank you very much. Honorable Minister, you may proceed.
Thank you very much, Honorable Choki, for the question. I agree with the Honorable Member that a localization program can assist with food security, and indeed in challenging times like this, it can also help to bring down or moderate food prices. I don't agree with the Honorable Member that these are simple answers. When one finds a simplistic answer, you simply mislead. Let me give a few examples on this. We looked at price rises over the last 3 months, from January to March, and global food prices increased by 17.5%, and South African domestic food prices went up by 1.5%. So that would support the idea that we've got to do more things locally. We've got to be able to build our capability. How do we do that? So we've got a couple of examples of how we do that. The first thing is we make available funding to small-scale farmers. We've launched now, together with Minister Didiza, a special fund that the Industrial Development Corporation is administering to support small-scale farmers. Secondly, we work with companies to build factories, food factories that would otherwise not be here. As an example, we're working with a company to build an edible oil refinery in Richards Bay that would be able to produce 500 million rands worth of South African value as soon as that is completed. Third, we work with large companies to support procurement from smaller companies. For example, Coca-Cola has now agreed to take a certain portion of all the sugar that they buy in the making of Coca-Cola and bring it from small-scale farmers and to buy it locally. Fourth, we work with large retailers to get them to support local farmers. For example, ShopRite, Pick n Pay, Woolworths, and Spar have all increased the level of local sugar that they buy, and it's close to 100% of normal sugar if you exclude specialty sugars. And finally, we work with industries to see how we can improve output from farms and from factories through competitiveness enhancement programs and measures like that. So there are a few examples. Obviously, in the limited time, I'm not able to deal with all the things that we do, but I've given 5 examples. I hope that that is helpful to the honorable members. He's smiling widely. He wants to cheer.
Sorry, Chair.
Point of order.
Point of order.
You have not said anything.
Point of order. Point of order.
Point of order. Let's listen to the point of order.
By point of order, Chair, I wanted to ask in terms of why are we still importing chickens? The chickens we're still importing.
That's not point of order. That's not point of order. Sit down.
Honorable members, 2 points that I want to speak to. If you rise for the point of order, be specific and be clear in terms of what point of order, and you follow the rules and shall be applied. 2, order, honorable members. Honorable members, order, please. Honorable members, in the beginning, we urge all of us to put on our masks. And I would say to the political party whips, if your members don't want to put the mic inside the house, can they be swapped with the members that are going to respect the rules of the house? No, Honorable Mautu, I'm making a ruling. And it goes to everybody. Thank you very much. Honorable members, the last supplementary question will be asked by Honorable Muda. Honorable Muda from the virtual platform.
Thank you, Honorable House Chair. My question is very much in the line of some of the previous speakers, but with a little different angle. Would the Honourable Minister agree that in the current environment where global supply chain backlogs are showing no signs of easing and is further driven by conflict-related export disruptions from the Russia-Ukraine war that he mentioned, it is now absolutely essential to eradicate corruption, to create a stable state, and to stimulate localization to become an even more self-reliant country that is less dependent on imports of food and goods, and by the eradication of corruption also become a more attractive and competitive exporter of goods. Thank you, Honourable Chair.
Honourable the Minister.
Thank you very much, Honourable Mulder, for your question, your last supplementary question. So I think first let's start with corruption. Corruption is ultimately theft from the poor. Corruption undermines the economic fiber of a country, it damages the GDP and jobs. We calculated in 2017 and we released the figures in the public domain in the middle of 2017, the enormous impact, a negative impact that corruption has on the South African economy. In addition to that, I think, Honourable Mulder, your point about building the capability of the state so that we can localize more is one that is well made. It's one that this government strongly is pursuing. I'm really happy that both the EFF and the FF Plus have put questions that are essentially in support of government policy on localization. I would urge you to buy local, to support local farmers, and to expand demand for locally produced goods. In these uncertain times across the world, countries are all saying that in the old paradigm, in the old days, the only issue was competitiveness. Now increasingly, they're about supply security. They're about building resilient economies. And we've got to be able to invest in building resilient economies. So I certainly want to support Honourable Mulder's call for greater levels of localization. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. The first supplementary question will be asked by Honourable Mbuyane from the chamber. Honourable Mbuyane.
Chair, the minister must respond first.
No. Honourable members, we are going to question number 255. Has been asked by Honourable Mbuyane to the Honourable Minister of Trade and Industry and Competition. Over to you, Honourable Minister. My apology about the omission.
Not a problem. Thank you very much, Honourable Chairperson. Honourable Mbuyane, the theft of scrap metal is a major challenge to the country's infrastructure program, damaging passenger rail lines, electricity supply, freight lines, and even healthcare facilities. It is driven, among others, by a massive spike in global demand and global prices that incentivize people to steal copper cable and metal by the destruction of functioning infrastructure. They sell it to middle persons, middle men largely. These products are then exported mainly to the Asian continent and used in their metal factories, foundries, steel mini mills, and so on. The DTIC has taken a number of steps to address this. First, it supported the law enforcement agencies a number of years ago through work done to support changes in the legislation to make the criminal penalties tougher, up to 20 years in jail, and to limit the right to bail in particular circumstances. This was subsequently taken through Parliament, it was passed into law, and it was promulgated by the President. And the first few prosecutions have started to take place under this new law. Secondly, the DTIC introduced a price preference system supported by an export tax that was introduced quite recently that has the effect of dampening the supply of scrap metal for export, because that's where a huge demand exists, and that's an engine that pulls the destruction of South Africa's infrastructure. Third, because we recognize these two measures are not sufficient, the department has commissioned research at what further measures can be taken, and it's currently evaluating a number of proposals. These will be taken through Cabinet for consideration, and honorable members will recall the President referred to this challenge in the State of the Nation address in February this year. The proposals made by different stakeholders range from a complete ban on export or sale of scrap copper cable, to control sales in domestic markets, to restrictions on the use of cash for scrap so that an electronic proof of origin is in place, to a licensing regime for scrap metal merchants. So these are all measures that are being looked at. Each of them have advantages, each of them have disadvantages. These have to be evaluated, thought through, and once Cabinet has had an opportunity to reflect on it, then of course we would be able to come back and indicate which of those elements are appropriate to deal with the problem of theft of scrap metal. I thank you.
Thank you. Honorable Mabuyane, the first supplementary question.
Buya. Thank you very much, Minister. In as much as there's legislation in terms of regulating the trade second-hand manager, the fact of the matter is that even the law enforcement seemingly were losing the fight against the scrapyard metal. Then we propose that, what is your view as a minister to expand and deal with this matter? Because the ANC has just proposed that, to call upon the government to consider the total ban of the scrap metal export. Has the department considered what the impact of that total ban on the export of scrap metal, and will the industry on the economy be sustainable, or whether the benefits of the permitting the continued export of the scrap metal outweigh the protection of the public infrastructure of government? Thank you.
Honorable Minister.
Thank you very much, Honorable Mbuyane. I think it's the question points to the complexity that we're trying to weigh up. So if we start with the research that we've done, we've looked at the international experience. Are there countries that prohibit the export of scrap metal? And the answer is yes, there are some. We've looked at the trade regime. Do we have trade agreements that would limit us? So we've carefully evaluated that. We've looked at the interest of those who export scrap and, of course, their legal rights to their business. But we've also looked at the enormous damage that scrap metal exports cause to the economy. Scrap metal is a critical input in the domestic value chain. We need it domestically. We need it for our steel mini mills, like the steel mini mill in Gqeberha. We need it for foundries, like the foundries in Gauteng. It's used in the country's infrastructure program. There's a strong argument to be made for some degree of restriction, which may include some types of scrap metal or copper cable that would be limited for export. We've already put in place late last year an export tax on scrap metal. We've seen a number of the players in the sector labeling the export of scrap metal, sometimes just doing basic smelting of it. And so there's this constant battle between the regulatory framework and those who profit from the export. When that research is done, when it's gone through the system, Honorable Mbuyane, we'd have a very explicit and clear answer. But the kind of considerations you pointed to are exactly what policymakers have to take into account. I hope, Honorable Mbuyane, that goes some way to answering your question while we complete this research and take it through the cabinet process. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The second supplementary question will be asked by Honorable Mafikson.
Thank you very much. So, Minister, just some advice, if I may. Any idea that the ANC gives you, you should ignore it because it will be a bad idea. Both Minister Gordon has said that you should you should ban scrap metal sales. Mr. Mboyani has said that you should ban scrap metal sales. You should go as far away as possible from that idea because every economic idea they come up leads to ruin. So the question really is, Minister, is that the Honourable Cuthbert posed a written question to you on the 22nd of February asking what quantitative and qualitative data are you using to make these decisions and what is exactly informing this decision around this particular policy. He also asked what discussions are taking place with law enforcement to go after those that are stealing infrastructure and selling it. And that I do agree with Mr. Mboyani on, that more needs to be done. But there were no details provided in that written question. So what data are you using to make this decision? And what are the discussions with the police about going after those that are stealing our infrastructure?
But Chairperson, that's another question from the primary question. That's another question from the primary question. It's up to the minister per the rules to really answer that. I shut up, Wena.
Who recognized Judith to speak?
Sit down, Maudwe. It's another question from the DA. Can't be correct. Sit down, Maudwe. No, Maudwe, out of order. Sit down. Sit down, Maudwe.
Honorable Shabalala.
I'm quite happy to take the question.
Okay, she's doing this for the third time. Can you remove her from the platform? She's completely out of order. We're busy here. Allow me to guide the proceedings. Honorable Malfixen is a point of order. Before you do that, honorable members, you must indicate even you are on the virtual platform that you would like to put a point of order. Same applies in the House. You can't do both. Raise your hand for the point of order and engage at the same time. Honorable Malfixen, your point of order, hopefully.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I think that you've ruled on this and we appreciate it. And if members are going to continually howl off of the platform, please throw them off. Thank you.
Honorable Minister, you may respond.
Thank you very much, Honourable Chair. I'm pleased to advise Honourable McPherson that the data we rely on would include trade data.
Honourable Minister, 1 second. Honourable Judith, your hand is up from the virtual platform. Honourable Shabalala.
It's fine, Chairperson. I will abide by your rules and your order in this instance. But I wanted to rule the member out of order. But it's fine. Minister is willing to take the question. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Honourable Minister, it's your discretion whether you answer both questions or one. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So I think I'd start with the data question. We use a range of data. Some of it would be trade data, looking at exports, both in the scrap metal category, and because there has been an allegation that there may be evasion, we look also at associated trade categories to be able to see the pattern there. Secondly, we compile data from users, state-owned companies. For example, Transnet make available to us data on the damage caused by scrap metal theft or copper cable theft on their operations. Honourable McPherson would be delighted to know that the Western Cape government has publicly indicated the deep challenges that's caused by theft of copper cable from the metro rail system. And so the damage is enormous. We'd also take examples of the output of the mining industry. For example, on copper, we'd look at what is South Africa's copper output. We'd compare that with South Africa's copper exports to be able to see the difference between these two, because that would be made up either by misclassification or by scrap copper. Most scrap copper appears to be taken illegally from the country's networks and systems. On the question of law enforcement, we work closely with the law enforcement agencies. Minister Tele and his team is very seized on this matter, and in fact, we work closely also at the time when a bill was produced to Parliament that provided for stiffer sentences and other measures to make it easier for the law enforcement agencies to crack down. However, having said that, it's an enormous challenge for the police to try to monitor every possible site where copper cable may be taken right across the country, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. So even though the law enforcement agencies have some successes, it's not sufficient to be able to protect the country's infrastructure. And for that reason, we need these new measures. I look forward to Honorable McPherson also supporting us as we take these efforts. And Honorable McPherson, of course, would then be delighted to know that he would also be supporting the African National Congress in its position, and in that way, helping to build South Africa. Thank you very much.
The third supplementary question will be asked by Honorable Mulder from the virtual platform. Honorable Mulder.
Thank you, Honorable House Chair. Can the Minister tell the House if the introduction of the export duty in the Customs and Excise Act as such has contributed to a decline of illegal export of scrap metal and more effective control of corruption, and if whether the officials at the South African trade ports and corruption there at the trade ports has been eradicated? Thank you, Chair.
Honorable Minister.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chair. I'm very popular with Honorable Mulder today. So on the question of the measures that have been taken, initially the price preference system and now the export tax would still be too early to make a definitive judgment, but on the price preference system in the first period when it was introduced, essentially what it entails, let me just perhaps explain the price preference system. It required scrap merchants, when they collect scrap, to sell it to domestic users, and only when domestic users are not able to take it up at a price discount can they export it. Now, we saw initially a decline in the export of scrap metal in the main category, but we subsequently saw a rise in associated categories, which is evasion. Honorable Mulder, very interestingly, that would be fraudulent misrepresentation by people in the private sector, these the persons who fill in the forms around the export. Some years ago, we worked with a private sector player to try to track examples of illegal actions in the export of scrap metal, and the police have acted against the individuals concerned. I think it's absolutely clear that we need to have not only a very tight control at ports of entry to be able to monitor the effectiveness of the measures we bring into place, but also to have tough prosecution of individuals, whether they are public officials or whether they are individuals in the private sector. This is causing serious and deep damage to the economy and to society. Sometimes when South Africans have no lights, no electricity, it's not always Eskom's load shedding. In a number of cases, it's the damage to public infrastructure, and that we must act against. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The last question will be asked by Honorable Jaku from the House.
It's Chwaku.
Jaku. Enkosi, you may proceed.
No, thank you very much, Chair. Minister.
And kindly just remove the mask so that you are audible
Oh,
enough.
okay. No,
and put it back after.
That one is too. You are very excited.
Order. Ask your question, Honorable Member.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Minister, you know, transport, Eskom and Transnet and Telkom, with the recent estimates that the theft of their metal infrastructure is costing them about 7 billion on an annual basis. And then I think that these scrap metals, obvious, you're saying that they actually find their way into the export market. Because we're saying that have you considered in terms of actually the banning of the exportation of those scrap metals. And then what we wanted to also know is that what have you done, any quantification in terms of the impact of such step, and would have on those what actually impact will those have on the livelihood that is sustained by the people who are doing the recycling of the metal? And also, probably like to say in terms of, you know, you've been running after these people say, though, they are taking all these
Your time
coppers
is up,
everywhere.
honorable member.
Have you went into the source, the people who are buying, which is mostly
Thank
is
you
like
very
that, you know, it's actually people who are
Honorable member,
white,
your
monopoly
time
capital,
is
people who are white. So there are people who are buying.
Honorable member, your
So
time
have you
is
gone to those
properly
ones
out.
there? Is this one there? Yeah, that's why it just came.
Honorable members, before that, before honorable minister, is that a point of order?
Mr. Chairperson, I think the member is out of order to point at one of our members like that, to say that member is white.
Honorable
Racial
members,
classification.
honorable minister, you may respond.
Chair, it was in the direction of
No,
the
no, no,
people.
honorable members. No, honorable members, may we have order? Honorable members, we can do better than this. May we allow the minister to respond?
Thank you very much, Honourable Sopo. I think the first part that I would like to say is illegality, theft, those kind of actions know no color. We have seen people of different colors taking part in this activity, and the law needs to be absolutely firm.
Honorable Minister, my apology. You know, honorable member from the second row of the DA and also the same row, the EFF one. If you don't feel like putting the mask, please swap with your honorable member from outside. Everybody shall put the mask while you are inside. Thank you very much. Proceed, honorable minister.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. We've done a quantification exercise on Luswapo on the cost of theft to South Africa. The work has not been completed. But what we've done is we've looked not only at the loss of Transnet and Prasa, we've also looked at the impact that this has on the economy. For example, when mines can't operate because the energy system has been disabled because of theft of copper cable or metal, when factories can't operate. And we've looked, among others, at things like so that would be the gross revenue that is foregone, the money that would otherwise have been earned that is foregone. We've looked at the additional cost of security that's been imposed as a result of this, because a lot more people now need to monitor this. When you take that into account, and it's a provisional figure, so it's not a figure that we would yet say is our final figure, but our initial estimates is that it could be as high as 46 billion rand, the damage that's caused. Potentially, if we do a further modeling exercise on the knock-on effects, it's likely to be even higher. On the question of the livelihoods of people who are collecting the scrap metal, there is a legitimate and legal trade, which is to collect real scrap metal that's lying there somewhere and sell it to a local foundry or a local mini mill. We want to be able to protect that. Then there's another business, a business that goes about digging up pavements and digging out the copper cable and using sophisticated equipment to cut it. People come with buckies late at night. They would have 5, 6 vehicles casing the place, making sure that the police don't come. All those things. It's organized syndicates. We have absolutely no sympathy there. The law must act without any fear, without any favor, and crack those syndicates. And so when it comes to jobs, the jobs of many South Africans are affected. Every time that Metro Rail in Cape Town is unable to operate, many thousands of workers are late for work. Those factories have additional costs. They lose production. So, in fact, it's in the country's interest that we act clearly on these things. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Honorable members, question number 244 has been asked by Honorable Heron to the Minister of Trade and Industry and Competition. Over to you, Minister.
Thank you very much, Honorable Heron, for the question. The question relates to the confectionery industry. The sweets and confectionery industry is an important industry and part of a key value chain that starts from the growing of sugar right through to the production of all the things we like, chocolates, candies, and so on. The sector, of course, the candy producing sector has expressed its concern about the cost of raw and refined sugar inputs. The confectionery industry itself has some protection from imported products through tariffs that range from 37% for sugar confectioneries to 20% for chocolates. Most products are either at or close to their WTO bound or maximum rates, with the exception, Honorable Heron, of chewing gum, which has a duty of 25% against a WTO maximum rate of 37%. The department also seeks to open markets for products from the South African confectionery industry. They have access to SADC markets, to the 4 other countries in the Southern African Customs Union, and to the EU and US markets through our trade facilitation arrangements. And now we're building this African Continental Free Trade Area, which will create an additional market that at its peak would be as big as 1.2 billion persons. The industry has access to raw materials currently from Eswatini on a duty-free basis, and it has quota-specific access to the EU and UK markets. This is now the raw sugar. In addition, sugar is accessed from different parts of the world, including Brazil. Now, coming to the key in the question, removing duties from raw sugar, Honorable Erin, is not government policy. Given the very large number of farmers and workers who are employed in sugarcane production, KwaZulu-Natal, Mpumalanga, other parts of the country, very often people who have a precarious livelihood who really struggle to put food on the table. So instead of trying to take away that little bit of protection that upstream producers have, we're working with the industry to promote greater local consumption of sugar and confectionery, and to identify measures to improve the diversification and the competitiveness of local sugar producers. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. Honorable, the first supplementary question will be asked by Honorable Heron from the House. Over to you, Honorable Member.
Thank you, House Chair, and thank you, Minister, for the answer. Clearly, the balancing act between from the sugar farmers through to the mills and then the converters being the confectionery sector is an important balancing act from a contribution to our economy, but also the growth of jobs and the job opportunities. Africa is apparently showing the largest growth in consumption of confectionery products in the world, far outstripping the rest of the world. And so there's great export opportunities for South Africa and South African jobs to be created in the confectionery sector if we can get this balancing act right. I hope the Minister would agree that there's an absurdity in the current situation where iconic South African products like Chappie's bubblegum, which is launched in South Africa in the 1940s, is now being manufactured in Pakistan or Eswatini because it is more cost effective to manufacture it there and bring it back into South Africa. The Cadbury Flake, which as a kid we used to call the Flakey, is being manufactured in Egypt and then being re-imported back into South Africa. It's an iconic South African product. So there's something broken in the sugar tariff regime that I think we need to fix. And I hope that the Minister will address that in the Sugar Master Plan, whilst trying to protect the jobs that are in the farming sector as well. We do understand that, but there are jobs to be created and there are jobs that have been exported as these products have been manufactured outside of South Africa when they used to be manufactured here. But we have a more urgent crisis right now, which is the flooding in KZN has caused a shortage of sugar for the confectionery sector. They're just simply not able to access the raw material. So can the Minister consider, as part of the flood relief regime, a temporary tariff relief for importing sugar for the confectionery sector? Thank you, House Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Minister.
Thank you very much, Honorable Erin, for putting, I think, a more balanced view on the challenges on both sides of the equation. Let me start by saying that the opportunities to grow on the African continent is vast. Africa is a young population, rapidly urbanizing, a growing middle class, and food consumption on the continent is going up. In addition to that, South Africa's confectionery suppliers have access to a range of sources for raw sugar. They're not confined only to South African sugar. Of course, I would advocate and recommend that they use South African sugar, but they're able to bring sugar from Eswatini, which is a very significant sugar producer, free of any duties. So zero duties on sugar coming across the border from Eswatini. In addition to that, they can bring sugar in from other SADC countries. It's regulated by a quota. It's also available to them at prices that they may otherwise not be able to afford. So we've got a bit of flexibility in our system. So when, on the question of Chappi's bubblegum, the sugar that Chappi's uses in producing the bubblegum in Eswatini, that same sugar can be landed in South Africa free of duty. So clearly in that example, the price of sugar is not the fundamental constraint. There may be other constraints, but it's not the price of sugar, because a factory in Eswatini will get the sugar at the same price as a factory in South Africa because of the agreement we have in the Southern African Customs Union, SACU. But I think you make a good point that we need to find ways in which we can localize even more of the sweets that South Africa produces. A recent example has been the measures taken by National Treasury to try to find a careful balance between the sugar levy, the health protection levy, and the need to protect jobs. And Minister Godongwana has tried to find that balance to ensure that South Africa remains a producer of sugar products. We're looking at how to improve the competitiveness. Part of it is at the level of the mills. Mills play quite a key role because they're the collectors of the raw sugar, and then they move the sugar on in refined form to other value chains. One element of it is to diversify sugar by considering a biofuel strategy that would use South African produced sugar, which may then both create greater economies of scale. You can produce more, so you can bring the price down, but you'd also have greater scope for imports. We are looking very carefully at the impact of the floods on the sugar industry. As I indicated in an earlier reply, the damage has been estimated to be more than 200 million rand. And KZN represents that careful balancing act. On the one hand, the industry in KZN has been very, very badly affected. Some farms have been absolutely devastated. So we've got to be able to find a way in which we can support them as rapidly as possible, as soon as the new sugar crops come on stream. At the same time, we need to be able to ensure access to sugar supplies. So we're looking at it very carefully. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. The second supplementary question will be asked by Honorable Malamachi from the chamber. Over to you, Honorable Malamachi. Macha. Malimacha.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chair. I will take it, Honorable Muatsi. Honorable Minister, South Africa and other member states of the South African Development Community have placed industrial development at the core of the region's integrated development agenda, with agro-processing, specifically in the sugar to confectionery value chain, being an important area in which industrial development can be pursued. Honorable Minister, are there any collaborative efforts in place to achieve this integration? And how is the production and distribution of the sugar confectionery value chain organized in terms of inter-firm linkages, governance, and regional logistics? Thank you very much, Honorable Chair.
Honorable the Minister.
Thank you very much, Honorable Moatsi, for that question. So within the Southern African region, if I go even beyond SACU, so maybe let me start with SACU, which is the smallest, it's 5 countries. Eswatini is the major supplier of raw sugar, some of which goes to South African mills, some of which are milled in Eswatini. Then if we look more widely in Southern Africa, there is a confectionery industry that's growing. There's users of sugar elsewhere in the continent. Botswana and Namibia, for example, have indicated their desire to be growing the production of food products that uses sugar. And so that's one part of the value chain. Coming to the question on the logistics system, of course, sugar is largely moved globally by ship. Brazil, in fact, there's even an expression for it, which is high seas sugar to distinguish it from sugar that we get from neighboring countries. And so on the African continent, we use a range of means, rail, road, and so on, to be able to move sugar. But the competitive advantage that we will get is if we are able to invest more on sugar logistics. If you go to the port of Durban, you'll see an entire terminal there. It's a sugar terminal, given the importance both of importing and exporting of sugar. So bringing together both the integrated supply chain between all of these elements and other advantages that the African continent has can catapult industrial development on the continent. Consider, for example, Africa is a massive producer of raw cocoa. We export that cocoa to Belgium, to France, to many other parts of the world. It's made into chocolate there and it's exported back to the African continent. But we've got all the elements. We've got the cocoa, we've got the milk, we've got the sugar. It's the organizing these different inputs to be able to produce these sweet products that all of us like, that constitutes the opportunity for the African continent. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. I think now you have started to look at me so that I can time you. Thank you so much. The third question will be asked by Honorable McPherson.
Thank you, Chair. Minister, with the Sugar Master Plan, there's a lot of moving components in the plan, of which confectionery and end use is one part of the plan. Another part of the plan, an important part of the plan, is around diversification of sugar cane and the use of ethanol. Now, for many years, this issue has been discussed in the committee. Your predecessor discussed it, you've discussed it, and there seems to be very little movement on the diversification into ethanol, which is a pity, because if we were further down the road on that, we would be having greater access to synthetic fuels, which may alleviate many motorists and inflation. So by when can we expect a finalization and a concrete plan on the diversification into ethanol and an announcement in that regard? Thank you very much.
Honorable the Minister.
Thank you very much for that question, Honorable McPherson. So the strategy in the Sugar Master Plan has got two elements of diversification. The first is to try to work with farmers to diversify the crops that they produce, so they're not as reliant on sugar production. Some of it could be nuts, essential oils. There's a range of alternative crops that are being pioneered already by farmers. They tend to be the larger farmers that have the know-how to be able to do that. So we still have to make sure that small-scale farmers are not left out in that diversification of crops. The second element is industrial use. So confectionaries are one element, as Honorable Aaron made the point. So is the use of sugar in things like beverages, for example, the colas, and sugar that we use in our teas. A third element of it is the diversification into synthetic fuels. And a final one is into the production of other products. For example, some bottles like this, honorable members, look in the supermarkets, you'll see some bottles have got a little green plant on the side. That means that a portion of that bottle has been produced with renewable resources. The Department of Mineral Resources and Energy is responsible for the biofuel strategy of South Africa. They've gazetted the first set of comments on that. As the DTIC, we support them, we work with them, and we encourage them to move with due speed. One of the challenges has been the challenge of the subsidy that would be required in order to be able to support the production of biofuels. When the fuel price is high, as it is at the moment, no subsidy is required. When the fuel price drops substantially, as it did in early 2020, but even prior to that, then all of those businesses would be unable to operate. And so they've proposed, investors in this area have proposed that government should have a default subsidy arrangement in place. National Treasury has done a little bit of work, as has the IDC, the Industrial Development Corporation, and it's because of the costs attached to it that we've had to be fairly circumspect at times when the fiscus has been quite constrained. I'm still encouraging my colleague and my colleagues who work on this in other departments to see what we can do to get this done as quickly as possible, because this can also increase employment over and above what we have at the moment. Thank you very much.
The last supplementary question will be asked by Honorable Muda from the virtual platform. Honorable Mulder.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. I couldn't hear you quite clearly. Would the Honorable Minister agree that the introduction of the so-called sugar tax by the Department of Health in 2018 as a health tax, and the recent neglect of the Department for Trade, Industry and Competition to implement the correct formula for import tariffs on sugar for 34 weeks in 2021, as it should have, could have negative impact on the confectionery manufacturing industry in South Africa. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Minister.
Thank you very much, Honorable Mulder. I think I heard most of the question, and to the extent that I've heard it correctly, it talks about the health protection levy and the potential increase of that levy and the impact that that would have on confectioners, on industrial users of sugar. If I've understood the question correctly, with any tax of whatever nature, there's always careful trade-offs. There are winners and losers in them. And economics is one of those dismal sciences where there are not too many instances where you have a complete win-win in these things. And so, on the one hand, we need to protect the health of populations, and the World Health Organization has, of course, lobbied that governments need to take steps to try to find public health measures. In the case of diabetes, things like the price of sugar beverages would be cited. On the other hand, in a country like South Africa, with the enormous unemployment challenges, with challenges of rural poverty, and of the difficulty that small-scale farmers have to shift from one type of production to another type of production, we have to take into account how price increases on the final product depresses consumer demand, and in that way damages jobs. And this balancing act has to be carefully looked at, and so that is what National Treasury has had to balance most recently in looking at the health protection levy. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister. That brings us to the last question for the day, which is question number 258, has been asked by Honorable Myeni to the Minister of Small Business and Development. Probably for clarity, because of time. Honorable the Minister, over to you, ma'am.
Thank you so much, Honorable Chairperson, and good afternoon to all the members of the House. To respond to Honorable Myeni, and thank you for the question that I have asked. And of course, we do understand the concern that the Honorable Member is raising in relation to the number of our offices as related to our agencies, whether we talk about the rural or the townships. As things stand, CFA on its own has 10 regional offices throughout the country. And of course, we are also sharing offices with CEDA, which has 54 branches again throughout the country and 63 location points. And as I indicated earlier, this is not enough. We've got so many townships, so many rural areas that need access to these services that we render as CFA and CEDA. And this is why we have taken a cautious decision to say we're going to be working with the LED offices in all local municipalities, and we're going to beef up the capability, because the fact that they're LED officers, it doesn't mean that they understand the services that we're offering. We'll therefore be looking for unemployed graduates that are going to come and be placed in those LED offices to assist all the small businesses that are in those areas with the services that we render as CETA and CFA. I want to emphasize here that at the center of this is also introducing a hybrid model
as we have seen during the COVID period, that people needed not to go to the offices physically. Others were able to ensure that they participate via the cell phone, whether it's applications and other things. And this is why we are in a process of developing a digital platform that must also give access to those that are digital literate, whilst we appreciate that we still have lots of digital illiterates. And at the center of that, of course, is the cost of data that people are complaining about, and we're also looking at that. Thank you, Chairperson. I would like to pause there.
Thank you very much. The first supplementary question will be asked by Honorable Mieni. Honorable Mieni.
Thanks, Honorable House Chair. Honorable Minister, what are the reasons that some enterprises go through all the SETA application processes successfully, yet fail to be financed by your entity, SEFA? Thank you, Chairperson.
Honorable Minister.
Thank you once more, Chairperson, and thank you, Honorable Member, for that question. As we've been embarking on the road shows, indeed, this has exposed the limited information or us being able to raise awareness in terms of the services that we are offering. SEDA, by its nature and mandate, according to the legislation, is responsible for business development support. And as part of doing that, they do contract consultants that develop business plans. Now, no consultant can come up with a business plan that they believe is not bankable. But when you cross the floor going to SEFA, which is responsible for the financing of the business plans, there's lots of things that they have to look at, guided by all the legalities in terms of the Prudential Authority and the PFMA, in ensuring that they undergo due diligence of each and every business plan. And when it comes to that, you'll find out, although we have a great business plan, but when you go directly to the person who's applying for the funding, some of them, they don't meet particular criterion. Others go to an extent of not submitting all the responsible information that is required by SEFA. We have said, now our responsibility as the department responsible for small business development is to ensure that we give access to all small businesses, access to funding, whilst we facilitate to partnerships access to markets. And at the center of that is enhancing the capability of the constituency that we are responsible for. As we make them understand the business component in terms of the requirements that are put in place by all those funding institutions, we also have a responsibility not to just decline from the SEDA perspective, from the SEFA perspective, to say you have not met ABCD. But SEFA then, they refer the applicant to SEDA, SEDA that in return assists the applicant with the relative things that are raised by SEFA. SEFA says, you have applied for this, we are not approving your business plan because of 1, 2, 3, and the person takes the 1, 2, 3 to SEDA, and SEDA helps the person with the 1, 2, 3 to come back to SEVA and apply for funding. And this is the resolution that we have taken, that this is the only way to enable maximum participation by small businesses in all the supply and value chain that we're talking about. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister. The second supplementary question will be asked by Honorable De Villiers. Honorable De Villiers.
Thank you, Minister. So exactly as you explained now, one of the problems with the agencies is that between SEDA and SEFA, people get moved from pillar to post, sent back to SEDA, then just have to go back to SEFA. And as something we can all agree on, the merger of these two agencies is a priority to help small business. Now, this has been called for as early as 2015 by the DA, and 6 years later, last year in 2021, this was actually approved by Cabinet for the first time. But in the 6 years that have lapsed, there's been a lot of uncertainty in key leadership positions in SEFA and SEDA, which has led to instability and bad service to small businesses. So, Minister, my question is really, can you commit to a deadline, to a set time and date when the merger of SEFA and SEDA will be accomplished? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable the Minister.
Thank you so much, Chairperson, and to you, Honorable De Villiers, for that important question. Indeed, the reason we've started right now, before we undertake all those legislative processes, that will lead to the merger of both SEDA and SIFA, we said it's important for the two agencies to come up with integrated systems. It's important that they start collaborating. The first thing is to agree on what method must be used by those that are applying for business development support that must also talk to the financial side. That's the first thing, whilst we are undertaking the processes of the legislative amendment, because the merger means that as these companies are scheduled differently according to the PFMA, there's the need for us to go back to the CEDA Act, which is going to incorporate SIFA, make amendments in terms of it being able to accommodate the functions that are brought by SIFA, whilst we are doing away with SIFA. We have asked Cabinet to give us 20 months, which started, of course, in this month, May. You can calculate, I think it ends in 2024, January, because of the period that we undertake when we do legislation. We are hopeful that Parliament will also have an appreciation of that agency, of one agency that must resolve the issues that are faced by small businesses. We are trying to stabilize within this 20 months period. As you are aware, you've quoted the 6 months, the 6 years and all of that. There was a moratorium that was put in place because we were preparing for the measure. We are lifting the measure. We've appointed an interim board that must make sure that whilst we are busy ensuring that the agencies are developing on the current mandate, but there's the transitional process that's undertaken so that by the time we finalize legislation, things run smoothly. And that is the work that is continuing. We will come back, of course, during the budget vote on the 10th of May and give details and, of course, go back to the portfolio committee in terms of the project plan, as we have committed to Cabinet that every 6 months we'll be going back to give progress so that there's certainty in terms of how and what is the work that we are undertaking to ensure that indeed we have one small business development agency. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. The third supplementary question will be asked by Honorable Matulelwa from Visual Platform. Honorable Member? Or is it, she's in the house, the one that was not putting the mask? You may proceed, Honorable Member.
Thank you, Chair. Minister, the informal sector is said to contribute about 17% of the country's employment, but yet it is the most under-supported in the country. The absence of your offices in the townships is evidence of this negligence of township entrepreneurs. What have you done to change the perception that you don't care about township businesses? What steps have you taken to protect township businesses from protection rackets, which endanger the security of township businesses? Mhlali ngaphambili, asinolala sidle as a point of order. Zingathi shuku vulani iParliament ngokupheleleyo nina cha niyeke ukuba ngozungula ichele be-masks up.
Thank you, honorable members. Order, honorable members, order. 1 second, honorable minister. Honorable members, we are consuming time and we don't give enough time for the questions. Rule number 84. I would request that we familiarize ourselves with the rules so that we don't time to time call you out of order, and you will be told if you're out of order. The unbecoming gesture and utterances, rule number 84 speaks to that.
As orders out of order.
Honorable member, I will eject you.
House Chair Chabalala on the virtual platform.
I don't know the Chabalala, but I'll continue after you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. I've raised my hand. Basically, the honorable member from EFF has asked a question that is not related to the initial question. Now, per the rules, it's up to the member to answer that of the executive, but it has nothing related to the primary question. That's the point of order. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Shabalala. Honorable members, there are rules in this house. And when the chairperson has made a ruling, I was just telling you so that I cautious you that if you don't put your mask, if you have got unbecoming gesture and utterances, rule number 84 applies. If you don't listen, honorable members will follow the due processes and will do what is correct thing to be done. Honorable Minister, you may proceed.
Thank you so much, Honorable Chairperson. Mhlonipheki Mathulala. Akuyonyani ukuthi silisebe asenze into ukuncedisana nosomashishini abengekho formalized. Ukuba ngaba uyangena apha ekhaya elitsha only kule veki phelileyo besiyoncedisa CCC equipment. That was for the second time this year. We've gone through the Western Cape. I'm talking about Western Cape. We've been to the Eastern Cape. We're doing it throughout the country. This is a program that seeks to make sure that we provide dignity to all the informal businesses, but not only to provide dignity, to ensure that we give them access towards the supply and the value chain that we are responsible for, not only as government, but together with the private sector. The first thing that we do is to provide them with the equipment in terms of support. I'm sure you know that on a day-to-day basis, the municipalities, again through the LED offices, they're inundated with requests from informal businesses, wherein they say we're in the beauty industry, we are in this industry, all the informal, they go and make requests to say this is the equipment that we request, and it is provided. That's part one. We are working with associations that are responsible for informal business support. And as we do that, because we understand that as the government or as the department alone, we really can't hit the nerve where it matters. It requires us to collaborate with other stakeholders because the ecosystem that we're responsible for is very big. It doesn't matter if you're going to talk about the transport industry. We have the taxi sector, whether you talk about Uber and any other people, and those are the stakeholders in the department that are not formalized. And ours is to engage with them in terms of saying, how do we complement the work that is done by the different sector departments? Whilst we agree again that those that want to be formalized, we assist them towards that process. Once more, this is a program that is targeting township and rural enterprises. As we do that to top it, for those that have grown now from being very small or micro, we offer the program in terms of the support that we give from 50,000 to 1 million rands through the Township and Rural Enterprise Program. And again, that's a program that has received much support and many businesses have tapped into it. I think what we ought to do, honorable members, now is to make sure that we all participate in our constituency offices, to make sure that the legislative environment, beginning at local level, does create a conducive environment for the informal traders. Because as you talk about them being chased away forever or their security, that cannot be done by the department. The security requires all of us to say, what is it that we want for South Africa? We leave the politicking, because we're talking about the contribution towards unemployment and the growing of the economy. And that needs no politicking, because it is a matter that we have all committed to in the National Development Plan. Come 2030, we are going to create 11 million jobs, and the National Development Plan says, out of the 11 million jobs, 9 million must come from small businesses. Now, any responsible lawmaker here is supposed to understand all those clauses in the National Development Plan and therefore identify his or her needs to say, how are we going to contribute to ensure that South Africa can grow and reduce unemployment? Thank you once more.
The last question, supplementary question. Honorable members and honorable ministers, thank you very much. The time allocated for the questions has expired. The outstanding replies shall be forwarded in the hindsight in written form. The House adjourns.
Long live Nalisoma, long live!